You found Mr. Nightfall, a place for long, atmospheric ghost stories and haunted encounters. Each tale is narrated slowly to help you unwind and rest. If you enjoy the stories, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're listening from tonight. Get comfortable, relax, and let the night unfold. Story 1. The room the hotel staff refuses to clean after midnight. I should have known better than to take the room on the 7th floor. The sign outside the Grand Riverview Hotel, a name that hadn't been accurate since the river changed course 50 years ago, flickered erratically, casting sickly yellow pulses over the cracked sidewalk. My bank account was bleeding red, the kind of red that makes you ignore the peeling paint on the lobby doors and the way the night clerk, a man with deep circles under his eyes who introduced himself only as Luis, barely looked up from his dog-eared paperback. The rate was absurdly cheap, almost insultingly so for a city where studio apartments cost more than my old car. 7th floor, Luis mumbled, sliding a heavy old-fashioned brass key across the scarred oak counter. Not a key card, a real key. Room 713, elevator slow, stairs are, well, they're there. He finally met my eyes, his expression unreadable. Checkout's at 11. Don't be late. There was a pause, a flicker in his gaze that might have been pity or maybe just exhaustion. And housekeeping doesn't service that floor after midnight. Policy. He shrugged, turning back to his book before I could ask why. The unspoken "don't ask" hung thick in the dusty air. The elevator groaned like a dying animal as it ascended, the overhead light flickering with each shuddering halt between floors. The 7th floor hallway was a world apart from the dimly lit but relatively clean lobby. The carpet, once a deep burgundy, was worn threadbare in patches, revealing stained plywood underneath. The pattern was obscured by decades of tracked-in grime. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else, a sharp, chemical tang like ammonia, but underneath it, the cloying sweetness of decay like forgotten fruit left to rot in a damp cupboard. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, casting a sickly, uneven glow that made the shadows in the corners seem deeper, more solid. There were only 4 doors visible down the short corridor, each painted a chipped institutional green. 713 was at the very end, next to a service closet with a padlock hanging open, revealing empty shelves coated in dust. The key turned with a gritty resistance. The door opened with a long, low creak that echoed in the silent hall. My first impression was of oppressive stillness. The room itself was small, dominated by a narrow, unmade bed with a thin, lumpy mattress. Faded floral wallpaper peeled away from the corners of the ceiling, revealing patches of water-stained plaster beneath. A single bare bulb hung from a chain over a scarred wooden desk. The window, overlooking a grimy air shaft in the brick wall of the adjacent building, was grimy and wouldn't budge more than an inch. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, revealing cracked tiles and a rust-stained sink. It was cheap, depressing, and exactly what I could afford. I dropped my duffel bag, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet, and tried to ignore the way the shadows seemed to cling to the corners of the ceiling. The first night was uneventful, just the unfamiliar creaks and groans of an old building settling, the distant muffled sounds of traffic from the street far below. I slept fitfully, the thin mattress offering little comfort. The second night, I woke abruptly at 2:17 a.m., not from a dream, but from a sound, a soft, rhythmic scritch, 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 like fingernails slowly dragging across wood. It came from the bathroom. I lay frozen, heart hammering against my ribs, straining my ears. The sound stopped. Silence. Just the hum of the ancient radiator under the window. I told myself it was rats. Old buildings have rats. But the sound hadn't been frantic scratching. It had been deliberate, almost patient. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to Marta, the only housekeeper I saw, a small woman with tired eyes who was vacuuming the third-floor hallway. She stopped. The machine, her hand tightening on the handle. "Room 713?" she asked, her voice low. When I nodded, her eyes darted away. "Old pipes," she said quickly, too quickly. "This building, it talks. Pay no mind." She restarted the vacuum with unnecessary force, the roar filling the hallway, a clear dismissal. I noticed she didn't have her cart with her. It was parked further down the hall, conspicuously empty of cleaning supplies. That afternoon, exploring the room more thoroughly, I found something tucked behind a loose baseboard near the bed. A small, water-stained photograph. It showed a young woman, maybe early 20s, smiling shyly at the camera. She had dark, wavy hair and kind eyes. On her back in faded blue ink, Eleanor, summer, 78. I tucked it into my wallet, a strange pang of melancholy hitting me. Who was she? Why was her picture hidden in this forgotten room? Night 3. The scritch, scritch, scritch returned, louder this time, unmistakably coming from the bathroom door. It wasn't nails on wood anymore. It sounded like something was slowly, deliberately scratching on the inside of the door. I lay rigid, sweat cooling on my skin. The sound stopped. Then a new sound, a soft, wet drip, drip, drip from the bathroom sink. I hadn't turned on the tap. The dripping grew louder, more insistent, echoing in the small space. I fumbled for my phone, the screen blinding in the darkness. 3:03 a.m. I forced myself out of bed, my bare feet cold on the gritty floor. I grasped the doorknob. It was icy cold. I turned it slowly, pushing the door open. The bathroom light flickered on with a sputter. The sink was dry, bone dry, no leak, no water anywhere. But the smell hit me immediately. That same cloying sweetness of decay, mixed now with the sharp, coppery tang of blood. My stomach lurched. The mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, but the air was cold. And in the condensation, written in a shaky, uneven hand, were 3 words: "Don't look back." I slammed the door shut, leaning against it, gasping. My rational mind screamed, condensation, temperature difference, stress. But the cold knob, the impossible writing, the smell, it felt too real, too present. I spent the rest of the night sitting upright on the edge of the bed, a kitchen knife I'd found in the desk drawer clutched in my trembling hand, staring at the bathroom door until the gray light of dawn seeped around the edges of the grimy window. I didn't sleep. I paced the small room, the photograph of Eleanor burning a hole in my pocket. I needed answers. At 7 a.m., I went down to the lobby. Luis was there, looking even more exhausted. "I need to talk to someone," I said, my voice tight. "About room 713. What's going on up there?" Luis sighed, a deep, weary sound. He closed his book. "Look, pal, it's just a room. An old room in an old hotel. Things happen. Pipes bang. Rats scratch. You're stressed. You're broke. I get it." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "But the staff, They won't clean it after midnight. Why? His shoulders slumped. It's not policy, it's respect. For Eleanor. My blood ran cold. Eleanor? Yeah, Eleanor Vance. Worked here, housekeeping, back in the late 70s. Sweet girl, quiet. He rubbed his temples. One night, October 31st, 1978, she was cleaning 7113, last room on her list, midnight shift. She never came out. He paused, his voice dropping. They found her. Well, they found what was left in the bathtub, throat cut, by her boyfriend, jealous type. Snapped. Police said he came in, hid in the closet, waited for her. After, he hanged himself in the same room, in the bathroom. Louise shuddered. They cleaned it up, of course. But the room, it never felt right again. Things moved. Sounds. Cold spots. Staff started getting sick on that floor, quitting. Management tried sealing it off, but the owners back then, superstitious types, said sealing it in just made it worse, trapped the anger. So they keep it open. Cheap room for desperate people. But no one cleans it after dark. It's her time, her shift. We leave her be. Pay our respects by staying away. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Check out today, please, before tonight. It's not worth the savings. I should have left right then. But pride, or maybe a stubborn refusal to be chased out by a ghost story, made me stay. I'll be fine, I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. Just superstitious nonsense. I went back to 713, the weight of Luis's words pressing down on me. I took the photograph of Eleanor out. Her smile seemed sad now, knowing what I knew. I placed it carefully on the desk, facing the bed. I'm sorry, I whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. The day passed in a haze of dread. I tried to read, tried to sleep, but every creak of the building, every distant shout from the street made me jump. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more watchful. The smell of decay lingered faintly, no matter how much I opened the stubborn window. As dusk fell, painting the air shaft outside in shades of bruised purple and gray, the atmosphere in the room thickened. It wasn't just cold. It was a deep, bone-chilling cold that seeped through my clothes. The buzzing, fluorescent light in the hallway outside my door flickered violently, then died, plunging the corridor into near darkness. Lit only by the dim emergency exit sign at the far end, I sat on the edge of the bed, the knife in my lap, my eyes fixed on the bathroom door. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 11:58 p.m. The dripping started again. Drip, drip, drip. Slow, rhythmic, impossibly loud in the silence. Not from the sink this time, from the ceiling. I looked up. Water wasn't falling, but the sound was there, echoing as if from a great depth. Then the scritch, scritch, scritch began, not on the door, on the wall beside the bed, like fingernails dragging slowly down the plaster beneath the peeling wallpaper. My breath came in shallow gasps. The cold intensified, frosting my breath in the dim light from the street lamp outside. The dripping stopped. The scratching stopped. An absolute, suffocating silence fell. Then a new sound, a soft, wet, gurgling breath. It came from the bathroom, not the doorway, from inside the room near the foot of the bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My body was locked in terror. The breath came again, closer now. I could feel the displacement of air, a cold pressure moving towards me. The smell of decay and blood was overwhelming, thick enough to coat my tongue. A shape began to coalesce in the deepest shadow near the closet door, not fully formed, but a deeper darkness, a suggestion of a figure hunched over, the glint of something wet, and dark on the floor beneath it. A low, broken moan escaped it, a sound of pure, unending sorrow that vibrated in my bones. It wasn't anger I felt radiating from it. It was despair, a profound, bottomless grief that made my own eyes sting. The figure shifted, turning slightly. In the faint light from the window, I saw long, dark, wet hair clinging to a pale, indistinct face. One hand, slick with something dark, reached out towards me, trembling. "Don't look back." The words from the mirror screamed in my mind, but I couldn't look away. I was frozen, trapped in the gaze of a sorrow that had festered in this room for nearly 50 years. The hand stopped inches from my knee. The gurgling breath hitched. A single, choked sob escaped the shadow. Then the figure slowly raised its head. Where a face should have been was a ruin, a dark, wet hollow where the throat had been severed. But the eyes were clear, human, and filled with such infinite sadness that it shattered something inside me. Eleanor, not a monster, a victim, trapped. A choked whisper, barely audible, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Cold, so cold. The sound of a cleaning cart rattling violently in the hallway shattered the moment. The figure vanished instantly, as if snuffed out. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, replaced by a wave of icy sweat on my skin. I heard brisk footsteps stopping outside my door. A key scraped in the lock. Marta stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't holding cleaning supplies. She held a small, worn rosary in one hand and a spray bottle of what smelled like vinegar and herbs in the other. Her cart was empty. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, her voice trembling. "After midnight. I told Luis you were still here." She quickly stepped inside, slamming the door shut behind her, fumbling to lock it. She didn't look at me. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the spot near the bed where the figure had been. "She's upset. You stayed. You looked." She made the sign of the cross rapidly over the doorway, then the bed, then the bathroom door. The sharp, clean scent of the herbal spray cut through the lingering decay. I saw her," I stammered, tears streaming down my face. "Eleanor, she's so sad." Marta's shoulders slumped. She looked at me, her own eyes glistening. She always is, every night, waiting for her shift to end, waiting to go home. But she can't. The anger, his anger, it binds her here, like chains. She walked to the desk, her movements quick and nervous. She picked up the photograph of Eleanor I'd left there. Her thumb stroked the young woman's face. He trapped her, even after death. The hotel, it holds on to pain, especially rooms like this. She placed the photo back down, carefully. "You need to leave, now, before he wakes up. He doesn't like visitors, especially not when she's visible." "Who?" I whispered, dread coiling in my stomach. "The one who did this," Marta said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "He's still here, too, in the quiet, in the shadows, behind her sorrow. When she gets too loud, too. Scene! He comes to silence her. Again." As if on cue, the temperature plummeted once more. The overhead light in the room flickered wildly, then died completely, plunging us into near darkness. Only the faint, flickering glow from the hallway emergency light under the door illuminated the room. The gurgling breath returned, but this time it was deeper, wetter, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards. It came from the bathroom. Marta gasped, clutching her rosary so tightly her knuckles turned white. "His presence," she breathed. "He knows you saw her. He doesn't like witnesses." The growl intensified, closer now. The doorknob of the bathroom began to rattle violently, as if someone was trying to force it open from the inside. Not scratching. Rattling. With violent, impatient force. Marta grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Come on, now!" She yanked me towards the door. I snatched my duffel bag and the photograph of Eleanor from the desk. As Marta fumbled with the lock, the bathroom door burst open with a splintering crack. The light from the hallway bled into the room, casting long, monstrous shadows. Framed in the bathroom doorway was a shape that made my blood freeze. It was tall, indistinct, a coalescence of the deepest shadows, but I could see the thick rope-like cord hanging from its neck, swaying slightly. Its face was a featureless void, but I felt its gaze, a wave of pure malicious hatred that stole my breath. It let out a roar that wasn't sound, but a physical pressure against my chest, filled with rage and possessiveness. It lunged, not towards Marta, but towards the spot where Eleanor's sorrowful figure had stood. Marta threw the door open and shoved me into the hall. I stumbled, falling hard on the threadbare carpet. She slammed the door shut behind us, fumbling desperately with her keys to lock it. The lock clicked just as a tremendous thud shook the door in its frame, followed by that same silent, hate-filled roar that vibrated through the wood. The door handle rattled violently, then stopped. An eerie silence fell, broken only by our ragged breathing and the frantic buzzing of the single working fluorescent light down the hall. Marta leaned against the opposite wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, trembling. She made the sign of the cross over and over. "He's back in the quiet," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For now. But he knows you were here. He remembers." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a fear that went beyond the supernatural. "You have to go, tonight. Don't come back. Don't even look at this hotel again. He marks those he sees. He waits." I didn't argue. I couldn't. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled down the silent, buzzing hallway towards the stairs. I didn't wait for the groaning elevator. I took the stairs two at a time, the sound of my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the concrete well. I burst out into the lobby. Luis was gone. The desk was empty. The only light was the flickering neon sign outside, casting its sickly glow through the glass doors. I fumbled the brass key onto the counter, my hand shaking so badly I could barely let go of it. I didn't look back. I ran out, into the cold night air. The city sounds a blessed, chaotic roar after the suffocating silence of the 7th floor. I found a cheap motel 2 blocks away, paid cash for a room with a deadbolt and a window that actually opened. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the knob, and sat on the bed with my back against the wall, the photograph of Eleanor clutched in my hand. Dawn felt like a lifetime away. I kept replaying Marta's words. He marks those he sees. He waits. I left the city the next morning, didn't look back, but sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the house is silent and the shadows stretch long across my bedroom floor, I hear it, faint at first. A soft, rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch on the wall beside my bed. Then the wet, gurgling breath, and beneath it, a low, guttural growl that vibrates the floorboards, filled with a hatred that hasn't faded in 50 years. I freeze. I don't turn on the light. I don't look toward the shadows in the corner. I just hold Eleanor's photograph tightly, whispering into the darkness. I see you. I remember. Because I know. He's waiting. He's patient. And he never forgets a face. The cold spot near the closet door grows deeper, and the dripping starts again. Not from the sink. From the ceiling. Drip. 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 Midnight is coming, and housekeeping won't be stopping by. And that is the end of this story. Now let's begin a new one. Something keeps knocking from inside the walls. At exactly 3:17 a.m. The house on Hemlock Street wasn't chosen. It was assigned a corporate relocation package with non-negotiable terms. Live here or lose the job that was my only lifeline after the divorce. The Victorian was grand in the way decaying things are grand, imposing, with gingerbread trim bleached bone white by decades of sun, a wraparound porch that sagged like a tired spine, and windows that watched the street with the blank, dusty eyes of the long dead. The realtor, a woman whose smile never reached her tired eyes, called it a fixer-upper with character. She didn't mention the silence that wasn't peaceful, but watchful. She didn't mention the smell that lingered beneath the fresh paint and lemon oil, a faint, cloying sweetness like overripe peaches left in a closed cupboard, mixed with the damp chill of deep earth. And she certainly didn't mention the knocking. It started on the third night. I was deep in the fragile sleep of exhaustion, tangled in unfamiliar sheets in the master bedroom on the second floor. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 3:16 a.m. The house was utterly still, the kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums until you hear your own blood rushing. Then, at precisely 3:17 a.m., it began. Thump! Not loud, not startlingly so, just a single, solid thump, like a heavy sack of flour dropped onto a wooden floor. It came from inside the wall beside the bed. The old plaster vibrated faintly against my back where I lay. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Rats? Old pipes settling? The house was ancient. Such things happened. I waited, straining my ears. Silence. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I exhaled, willing my muscles to relax. Just the house settling. Go back to sleep. The next night, same time, 3:17 a.m. Thump. Louder this time, closer, like it was moving through the wall cavity towards the head of the bed. My skin prickled. I lay rigid, eyes wide in the darkness, every nerve ending alight. The silence that followed was thicker, heavier, expectant. I didn't sleep again that night. By the fifth night, I was a wreck. Dark circles under my eyes, hands trembling from too much coffee and too little sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed at 3:15 a.m., staring at the wall, a baseball bat resting across my knees. 3:16. The air grew colder, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seeped through the plaster and into my bones. My breath fogged in the moonlight, slicing through the window. 317. Thump. Not just a thump. A bang. Violent, insistent, like a fist pounding on the inside of the wall right at head height. The plaster dust sifted down onto the bedspread. I jumped, gripping the bat, half rising. "Who's there?" My voice sounded thin, ridiculous in the suffocating quiet. No answer, just the echo of the bang fading into the house's bones. The cold receded slowly, leaving me shivering, sweat cooling on my skin. It wasn't rats, it wasn't pipes, it was calling. At the same time every night, a ritual, a summons. I started researching. The local historical society archives were dusty and smelled of mildew. The house was built in 1898 for Silas Crow, a reclusive watchmaker. His wife Eleanor died of consumption in 1905. They had one son, Thomas. Thomas vanished in 1923 at the age of 28. No body found. Presumed drowned in the river. The file contained a single faded photograph, a stern-faced man, a frail woman holding a small boy with dark, solemn eyes, and a note handwritten on the margin in spidery ink. Young Crow was prone to night terrors, spent weeks locked in his room before he disappeared. Neighbors reported strange knocking sounds from the walls at odd hours. 3:17 a.m. wasn't odd. It was specific, obsessively specific. The knocking became my anchor to a waking nightmare. I stopped sleeping in the master bedroom. I dragged an air mattress to the sunroom on the first floor. 3:17 a.m. Thump. From the wall beside the daybed. I moved to the guest room down the hall. 3:17 a.m. Thump. From the shared wall with the master bedroom, I tried the basement, a damp concrete space filled with old trunks and the furnace's groan. 3:17 a.m. Thump. From the ceiling directly above me, so violent it shook dust from the rafters. It wasn't tied to a room. It was tied to me. And to the time, 3:17 a.m. The witching hour? No, something else. I checked the newspaper archives for the date Thomas Crow vanished, November 3rd, 1923. The time of his last sighting, 3:17 a.m. He'd been seen arguing with his father near the river dock. He never came home. The police report listed his personal effects found near the water. A pocket watch stopped at 3:17. The house wasn't haunted by a generic spirit. It was haunted by Thomas Crow's final, trapped moment. The knocking wasn't a ghost trying to get out. It was the sound of him trying to get back in. To the house, to the room where he lived, to the life he'd been torn from, and it was resonating through the walls, a desperate echo, seeking its source. The cold wasn't just cold anymore. It was the chill of the riverbank in November, the smell of overripe peaches, the scent of the orchard that used to border the property where Thomas was said to have played as a child. The house was replaying his memory, and I was the audience, the unwilling witness. I couldn't take it. I called the only person I thought might understand, the reclusive historian who'd helped me with the archives, Dr. Eris Thorne. His voice on the phone was dry, like dead leaves. Hemlock Street? 3:17? He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. That's the Crow Boy's time. He's not trying to scare you. He's trying to remember. The house. It holds on to pain like a sponge, especially the moment of severing, his. He paused. The knocking. It's him hitting the wall from the inside of his own memory, trapped in that second, over and over. He needs an anchor, something from then to tether him here. Otherwise, the echo just grows louder, more desperate, until it breaks something. What something? I whispered, my throat tight. The wall, Thorne said grimly. Or your mind. Find what he lost. Find the watch. It's the key. He died holding it. It's the only thing that bridges his time and yours. Bring it to the wall at 3:9. Let him feel it. It might quiet the echo. Finding the watch felt impossible, lost to the river for a century. But Thorne mentioned a detail from the police report. Thomas's father, Silas, had been a watchmaker. He'd made the pocket watch for his son's 18th birthday, unique, engraved. Silas, consumed by grief and guilt, rumors swirled he'd argued Thomas into leaving that night, had never thrown anything of his son's away. His workshop, in the small shed behind the house, had been sealed after his death in 1930. "Check the shed," Thorne urged. "If it's anywhere, it's there, behind a loose floorboard, in a false bottom drawer." Silas couldn't bear to look at it, but he couldn't bear to part with it either. The shed was a dilapidated wooden structure choked by ivy, its door rusted shut. I kicked it open, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from a grimy window. Shelves lined the walls, covered in tools, gears, springs, and the ghostly outlines of removed items. A workbench stood in the center, scarred and stained with oil. My fingers trembled as I pulled up loose floorboards, pried at the back of drawers, tapped walls for hollow spaces. Nothing. Despair clawed at me. Then I noticed the workbench itself. The wood was warped, but one section near the leg seemed newer, less stained. I pried at it with a screwdriver. It lifted. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth brittle with age, was a small leather pouch. Inside was the watch, heavy, silver, tarnished black in places. I opened it with numb fingers. The glass face was cracked, frozen forever at 3:17. The interior lid bore a single engraving: "To Thomas, time is love, Father." That night, I didn't flee. I faced it. At 3:15 a.m., I stood in the master bedroom, the cold already seeping from the walls, frosting my breath. The pocket watch was heavy in my palm, ice cold. I pressed it flat against the wall where the knocking always started, right at head height. The plaster was freezing. I closed my eyes, holding my breath, waiting. 3:17 a.m. Silence. No thump, no bang. Just the frantic pounding of my own heart. Had it worked? Had the watch? Then a new sound. Not from inside the wall, from right beside me. A soft, wet, gurgling sigh, like water draining from a clogged sink. I snapped my eyes open. Standing inches away, partially translucent, shimmering like heat haze off pavement, was a young man, early 20s, dressed in clothes from another century. Trousers, a white shirt, suspenders. His hair was dark, plastered wetly to his forehead. Water dripped from his clothes, pooling on the floorboards at his feet. His eyes were wide, terrified, fixed on the wall where I held the watch. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me at the memory of his last moment. And he was shivering violently, his lips blue, his skin the color of river clay. He reached out a dripping hand towards the watch, his fingers passing through the metal, through my hand, holding it. A look of profound, heart-wrenching confusion crossed his face. He couldn't touch it. He couldn't grasp the anchor. He was trapped in the echo, unable to step into the present, unable to touch the proof of his own existence. The gurgling sigh became a choked sob. Tears, clear as river water, streamed down his pale cheeks. He looked at me then, his eyes locking onto mine, not with malice, with a desperate, drowning plea. "Help me." The cold intensified, biting deep. The smell of river mud and wet wool filled the air. The pocket watch vibrated in my hand, a frantic, terrified pulse. Thomas wasn't just knocking, he was drowning. Over and over, in the memory of that November morning, pulled under by the current of his own unresolved end. The watch was ashore, but he couldn't reach it. I did the only thing I could think of. I didn't just hold the watch against the wall. I pressed it into the plaster, hard. Ignoring the splinters, ignoring the cold that burned like fire, I poured every ounce of my focus, my will, my desperate desire to help into that point of contact. "Thomas," I whispered, my voice raw, "it's real. You're real. Take it. hold on. The vibration in the watch surged. The young man's form flickered, grew momentarily more solid. His dripping hand pressed flat against the wall right over the watch. For a fraction of a second, his fingers seemed to touch the metal. A look of pure, radiant relief flooded his face. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first breath he had taken in a century. The gurgling sigh eased. Then the light from the window seemed to shift. Not the moonlight. A soft, golden, dawn-like light began to emanate from the wall itself, from the spot where the watch was pressed. It wasn't hot, it was warm, like sunlight on stone. Thomas stepped into the light, not through the wall, but into the glow. His form became less translucent, more solid, more peaceful. The water stopped dripping from his clothes. The terrible blue tinge left his lips. He looked at me one last time, not with fear, with gratitude. A small, sad smile touched his lips. He raised a hand, not in farewell, but in benediction. Then he turned and walked, not into the wall, but upwards, following the shaft of golden light that seemed to stretch towards the ceiling, towards the sky beyond. He dissolved into the light, like mist burning off a river at sunrise. The pocket watch in my hand grew warm. The frantic vibration stilled. The cold vanished, replaced by a deep, comforting warmth that seeped from the wall into my bones. The smell of river mud faded, replaced by the clean scent of rain-washed earth. The silence that fell wasn't the watchful, hungry silence of before. It was the deep, peaceful quiet of a burden lifted, of a debt paid. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face, the warm watch clasped tightly in my hand. Dawn painted the room in soft pinks and golds. The house felt different, lighter, freer. The walls no longer felt like prison bars, but like shelter. I still live in a house on Hemlock Street. The realtor was right. It has character, but it's no longer haunted by a trapped moment. It's inhabited by peace. I keep the pocket watch on the mantelpiece in the living room. It doesn't keep time. The hands are still frozen at 3:17, but sometimes, on quiet mornings, I swear I feel a faint, warm pulse coming from it. Not a knock, a heartbeat, steady, calm, finally at rest. And I know Thomas is no longer drowning in the dark. He found a shore, because someone finally held out a hand. Someone finally listened to the knocking from inside the walls. The house is quiet now, truly quiet. And for the first time in 100 years, the silence is a gift. That's the end of this story. Now we move on. The dead frequency of station K109. I am writing this on a typewriter because I can no longer trust anything with a screen. If you see a digital clock flicker, if your phone buzzes but no one is calling, if the radio in your car turns on by itself, run. Do not investigate. Do not try to tune it in. Just run until you find silence. My name is Elias. I was a radio enthusiast, a ham operator, the kind of guy who spent his weekends building antennas in his backyard and listening to static from across the ocean. I love the noise. I love the idea that the air around us is filled with invisible voices just waiting to be caught. I found the job on a forum for vintage electronics. A user named Signal Master posted a request for a caretaker for an old AM radio station in the Mojave Desert. Station K109, night shift engineer, maintain transmitter, log signal strength, 3,000 month, cash, isolation required. It was perfect for me. I needed the money and I wanted to get away from the city, from the noise of modern life. I drove out to the coordinates. It was miles from civilization, a small concrete building at the base of a massive, rusted radio tower that stretched hundreds of feet into the desert sky. The tower hummed. You could feel it in your teeth when you got close. The previous engineer was waiting for me. He was a thin, twitchy man named Ornate. He had dark circles under his eyes and chewed his fingernails until they bled. "It's automated," Ornate said, shoving a ring of keys into my hand. "The playlist is on a loop. Old jazz, big band, stuff nobody listens to. Your job is to keep the transmitter cool. Check the gauges. If the needle goes into the red, flip the breaker. That's it." "Why do you need a person here if it's automated?" I asked. Ornate looked at the tower. "Because sometimes it drifts. The signal drifts. You have to bring it back." "Drifts to where?" He didn't answer. He got in his truck and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust that hung in the still air. I settled in. The station was a time capsule. Reel-to-reel tape decks, vacuum tube amplifiers, a smell of ozone and old dust. The only modern thing was a small mini-fridge in the corner. The first week was peaceful. I sat in the control booth, watching the VU meters bounce to the rhythm of Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman. I read books. I drank coffee. I watched the sun set over the dunes. But on the 8th night, the drift started. It was 2:00 a.m. The station was playing a slow, mournful trumpet solo. Suddenly, the music warped. It slowed down, the pitch dropping until it sounded like a dying cow. Woo! Then static, white noise that sounded like screaming. I looked at the frequency dial. It had moved. We were supposed to be at 1090 a.m. The needle was drifting down 1080, 1070, 1060. I grabbed the manual tuning knob. It was hot to the touch. I tried to turn it back, but it fought me. It felt like someone was holding it from the other side. "Come on," I grunted, twisting hard. The static cleared, but it wasn't jazz. A voice cut through the speakers, a voice that sounded wet, gargled, like someone speaking with a throat full of water. "Is anyone listening?" I froze. This was a broadcast frequency. It shouldn't be picking up two-way traffic. I grabbed the microphone. "This is station K109. You are interrupting a broadcast. Identify yourself." Silence. Then a laugh, a dry, crackling laugh. "Elias, you have pretty eyes." I dropped the mic. It hit the desk with a thud. How did they know my name? I hadn't told anyone I was here except the forum user, and I used a pseudonym online. I wrestled the tuning knob back to 1090. The jazz returned, upbeat and cheerful, mocking my fear. I checked the transmitter logs. There was no record of the interruption. According to the machine, the jazz had been playing the whole time. I told myself it was interference. A trucker with a powerful CB radio messing with me. The next night, it got worse. I was doing my rounds, checking the massive cooling fans in the transmitter room. The hum of the tower was louder tonight. It felt heavy, pressing on my chest. As I walked past the main capacitor bank, I heard tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from inside the metal casing of the transmitter. I stopped. "Hello?" Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, intelligent. I put my ear against the warm metal. "Let us out," a chorus of whispers said. It sounded like hundreds of people whispering in unison. "It burns! The wire burns!" I jumped back. Then the lights in the room flickered and died. The only light came from the glowing orange vacuum tubes inside the transmitter. In that dim orange light, I saw shadows moving, not on the walls, inside the tubes. The vacuum tubes were glass cylinders the size of milk jugs. Inside, filaments glowed to amplify the signal. But inside tube 4, something was crawling. A black, shadowy shape, pressing its hands against the glass from the inside. It had a face of pure anguish, mouth open in a silent scream. I ran back to the control booth and locked the door. I grabbed the station phone to call the owner. "Signal, master." The line was dead. No dial tone, just the sound of wind. Then the wind stopped, and a voice spoke. "Don't leave, Elias. The broadcast is just starting." I slammed the phone down. I sat in the chair, staring at the glass window that looked out into the desert. It was pitch black outside. Then the on-air light turned on. I hadn't touched the console. The music stopped. A voice came over the studio monitors. It was my voice. "Welcome back to the midnight hour," the voice said. "Tonight, we have a special request for Elias, a song from the other side." Then a sound began to play. It wasn't music. It was the sound of digging. Shovels hitting dirt, crunch, scrape. Then the sound of wood splintering. A coffin lid breaking. Then heavy breathing. I covered my ears. "Stop it! Stop it!" I reached for the master brake to kill the power. My hand stopped inches from the switch. Pain, white-hot pain, shot through my arm. I looked down. My veins. The veins in my arm were glowing orange, like the vacuum tubes. I could feel the electricity surging through me. I was becoming part of the circuit. "Do not cut the signal," my own voice said through the speakers. "We need the carrier wave. We need to travel." I fell to the floor, convulsing. The pain was unbearable. I could feel voices in my head, memories that weren't mine. I remembered dying in a fire. I remembered drowning in a lake. I remembered being buried alive. They were the voices of the dead, and they were using the radio tower as a bridge. I blacked out. I woke up the next morning on the floor. The sun was shining. The jazz was playing. My arm was burned, a Lichtenberg figure scar tracing down my skin like a lightning strike. I packed my bag. I was leaving. I didn't care about the money. I walked to my car. It wouldn't start. The battery was dead, completely drained. I checked my phone. Dead. I was stranded. I walked back to the station. I had to fix the car or find a radio to call for help. I went to the workshop in the back. I found a spare battery. As I was carrying it to the car, I looked up at the tower. There was something climbing it. A man. He was halfway up, clinging to the metal struts. "Hey!" I yelled. "Get down! It's dangerous!" He stopped. He turned his head 180 degrees like an owl. It was ornate, the previous engineer, but his eyes were gone, burned out sockets, and his mouth was sewn shut with copper wire. He let go of the tower. He fell hundreds of feet. I watched him hit the ground. Thud. I ran over to him. His body shattered on impact, but there was no blood. He was hollow. His skin was just a shell. Inside, he was filled with old radio parts, transistors, wires, capacitors. He was a machine made of meat and junk. And he was still moving. His broken hand reached up and grabbed my ankle. A voice came from his chest, sounding like a broken speaker. "You are the new component. You must maintain the signal." I kicked him off and ran. I ran into the desert. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran away from the tower. I walked for hours. The sun beat down on me. I was dehydrated, delirious. I saw a house in the distance, a small shack. I ran to it. "Help, please!" I burst through the door. It was the control room. I was back at the station. I had walked in a circle. No, I had walked straight. The space around the tower was warped. It was a loop. I collapsed in the chair. The sun went down. The on-air light turned on. "Welcome back, Elias," the voice said. "Tonight, we are going to open the channel wide." The frequency dial began to spin on its own. Fast. A blur. The hum of the tower grew to a deafening roar. The glass of the control booth window shattered. Outside, in the desert, the sand began to vibrate. Shadows rose from the dunes. Thousands of them. The ghosts of the airwaves. They floated toward the station. I knew what they wanted. They wanted a body. They wanted my body. I looked at the console. I couldn't turn it off. They controlled the power. But I saw the microphone cable. It was an XLR cable, thick and shielded. If I couldn't stop the signal, I had to stop the receiver. I grabbed the cable. I wrapped it around the main output transformer. I grounded the positive lead to the negative. A short circuit. I pulled tight. Boom! The console exploded. Sparks showered the room. Fire erupted from the tape decks. The screaming from the speakers turned into a high-pitched shriek of agony. "No!" The tower outside groaned. Metal twisted. I ran out the back door as the building caught fire. The tower was glowing red hot. The metal was melting. It collapsed. It fell in slow motion, crashing into the dunes with the force of a meteor. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I walked again. This time, the loop was broken. I found a highway by morning. I hitched a ride to the nearest town. I thought I was free, but I am not. I am writing this in a library. The person next to me is listening to music on headphones. I can hear it. Not the music. I can hear the static underneath the music. And in the static, I hear my name, Elias. We are still broadcasting. And my arm, the scar on my arm, is glowing, faintly, orange. I am a receiver now. I can't be around people. If I touch someone, they hear it too. They start to scream. They start to remember deaths they haven't died yet. I am going to the mountains, to a cave, somewhere deep underground where radio waves can't reach. If you hear a song on the radio that slows down, if you hear a voice that sounds like wet gravel, change the station, change it fast, before it changes you. That's the end of this story. Now we move on. The ghost who keeps rearranging the furniture while I sleep. It started with the armchair. Just a subtle shift, really. I'd left it angled towards the window, catching the late afternoon sun as I read. I woke the next morning, groggy and disoriented, to find it turned squarely to face the television instead. The worn corduroy cushion perfectly aligned with the center of the screen. A trick of the light, I told myself, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Maybe I'd absent-mindedly moved it after my third cup of coffee the night before and forgotten. Easy enough to dismiss. I turned it back. Problem solved. 2 nights later, it was the bookshelf. Not moved exactly, but reoriented. The heavy oak piece, which had stood flush against the east wall for the 6 months I'd lived in this cramped, rent-controlled apartment above Mrs. Gable's antique shop, was now pushed out at a 45-degree angle, creating a narrow, awkward corridor between it and the door. Dust motes danced in the shaft of morning light where the wall had been exposed, revealing decades of grime and a faint, yellowed outline of where the bookshelf had once stood. My skin prickled. I hadn't touched it. I'd barely even looked at it that day, buried under a mountain of freelance design work. I shoved it back with a grunt, the wood scraping harshly against the old floorboards. my heart thudding a little faster than it should have. "Old building," I muttered aloud, the sound unnervingly loud in the silent apartment. "Settling." But buildings don't settle by precisely repositioning heavy furniture into geometrically awkward arrangements. Logic, my usual refuge, began to feel flimsy. The next incident shattered any remaining illusion of coincidence. I came home late after a frustrating client meeting, dumped my bag by the door, and collapsed onto the sofa. It was positioned parallel to the long wall, facing the small kitchenette. I fell into a fitful sleep, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows. I woke hours later, stiff and cold, to complete darkness. I fumbled for the lamp on the side table and knocked it over. It clattered to the floor, the bulb shattering. Cursing, I switched on the main light. The sofa wasn't on the long wall. It was in the center of the room, perfectly centered, and it wasn't facing the kitchen anymore. It was facing the apartment's only door, the door that led out to the hallway and the rickety stairs down to Mrs. Gable's shop. My breath hitched. The angle was deliberate, almost confrontational. It felt like a sentry post, a silent observer waiting for someone or something to enter. The empty space where it had been felt like a wound in the room's familiar layout. A cold dread, deeper than mere annoyance, settled in my gut. This wasn't settling. This was intention. I spent the next day researching. The apartment building, a 3-story brick structure squatting on the corner of Elm and 5th, was over a century old. Mrs. Gable, a tiny woman with eyes like chips of obsidian who smelled perpetually of lavender and dust, had owned it since the 70s. When I asked her casually over a cup of weak tea, she insisted I drink while picking up a package she'd held for me about the building's history. She clammed up instantly. Her knuckles whitened around her teacup. "Old places have their ways, dear," she'd said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Best not to pry. Best just to live in it." She refused to elaborate, her gaze dark nervously towards the ceiling, towards my apartment. The look in her eyes wasn't just superstition, it was fear. That night, I decided to fight back. I dragged the sofa back to its rightful place with furious, trembling energy. I positioned the armchair just so. I even placed a small, heavy vase of dried flowers on the coffee table right in the center. A marker, a challenge. Move this, and I'll know it's real. I went to bed, exhausted, leaving the main light on, a pathetic attempt at warding off the unknown. I woke to darkness again. The main light had been switched off. The vase of dried flowers was gone, not knocked over, not moved to another surface. Gone, vanished. The sofa was back in the center of the room facing the door. The armchair was tucked neatly into the far corner facing the wall, as if in shame or punishment. And on the coffee table, where the vase had been, sat a single object. My old, battered copy of The Catcher in the Rye. I hadn't touched that book in years. It had been buried in a cardboard box labeled Misk Books in the back of my tiny closet. The ghost hadn't just rearranged the furniture. It had gone into my private space, my stored memories, and chosen a book. Placed it deliberately on the table. Why? Was it a message? A threat? Or just tidying? Panic, cold and sharp, began to replace the dread. This wasn't just about space anymore. It was about me. My things, my history, my sanctuary was being violated on a fundamental level. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed, every creak of the old building, every sigh of the ancient pipes sounding like the scrape of chair legs on wood. I'd drift off, only to jerk awake hours later, convinced I'd heard the soft, deliberate thump of furniture being shifted. My eyes would snap open, straining in the darkness, searching for the familiar silhouette of the sofa, only to find it wrong, always subtly, insidiously wrong. The rearrangements grew more complex, more personal. One morning I found all my shoes neatly lined up just inside the front door, pairs perfectly matched, laces tucked. Another day, every framed photograph on my walls had been turned to face the wall. My spice rack, usually a chaotic jumble above the stove, was organized alphabetically. My coffee mugs, which lived in a specific cabinet, were arranged by size on the counter. It was cleaning, organizing, but with a chilling, impersonal precision that felt utterly alien. It wasn't helpful. It was corrective. As if my own chaotic existence was an offense to the ghost's sense of order. The worst was the bed. I woke one morning to find it pushed flush against the wall shared with the vacant apartment next door. Not the usual headboard against wall position. The entire side of the bed was pressed flat against the plaster. Getting in and out required climbing over the footboard. It felt like being pinned, trapped. I spent hours that day wrestling it back, my muscles screaming, sweat stinging my eyes, fueled by a rage that bordered on hysteria. "Leave me alone!" I shouted into the empty apartment, my voice cracking. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with an unspoken answer. I started sleeping with the lights on, all of them. The overhead, the lamps, even the tiny nightlight in the bathroom. The electricity bill would be astronomical, but the darkness felt like an accomplice. In the harsh, unblinking glare, the apartment felt safer, more solid. The furniture stayed put. For 3 nights, blessed stillness. Maybe the light was a deterrent. Maybe it was just coincidence. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered. Then came the night the lights went out. It wasn't a power failure. The streetlights outside still cast their orange glow through the grimy window. It was the apartment's lights. One by one they clicked off. The overhead light first, then the reading lamp by the sofa, then the lamp on my dresser. Click, click, click. In the sudden, relative gloom, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with terror, and switched on the flashlight app. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes swirling in the air. The sofa was gone, not moved. Gone. The space where it should have been was empty. The armchair was gone too. The coffee table, the bookshelf, all my major furniture had vanished, leaving only the bed, the dresser, and the kitchen table and chairs. The room felt cavernous, hollowed out. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Where did it go? I swept the flashlight beam around the room. Nothing, just bare floorboards and empty space. Then the beam caught something on the far wall opposite the door. Words, scratched into the peeling paint, deep and jagged, as if carved with frantic, desperate fingernails. 3 words, "Stay in bed." The command, raw and primal, sent a wave of pure terror through me. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order from something that knew I was awake, something that was watching, something that controlled the very walls of my home. I froze, the phone trembling in my hand, the beam fixed on those awful words. The silence was absolute, thick enough to choke on. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the frantic thud of my heart. Slowly, deliberately, a sound began. From the hallway outside my apartment door, the soft, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of something heavy being dragged across the floorboards, pausing, then dragging again. It stopped right outside my door. The brass knob turned slowly, silently. The door swung inwards on well-oiled hinges I hadn't known existed. The hallway light was off, but the street light outside the building's main entrance cast a long, distorted shadow into my room. A shadow of something large, impossibly large. And within that shadow, 2 points of faint, sickly yellow light glowed where eyes should be. It didn't step inside. It just stood there, filling the doorway, radiating a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. A cold that seeped into my bones, into the marrow of my fear. The dragging sound started again, but this time it was coming from inside my apartment, from the direction of the vacant rooms beyond my bedroom wall. The sound of furniture being pulled back into place, slowly, deliberately, as if setting the stage. The shadow in the doorway didn't move. It just watched. Those yellow eyes fixed on me where I stood, paralyzed, next to my bed. The message was clear, colder than the deepest winter. You can rearrange it, I will put it back, and I will watch you while I do. I don't sleep with the lights off anymore. I don't sleep much at all. I sit in the center of the room on the floor, my back against the cold plaster of the wall farthest from the door, a baseball bat across my knees. The furniture is back. Everything is in its proper place, the way the ghost prefers. The sofa facing the door like a sentinel, the armchair tucked away, the bed pushed tight against the shared wall. I haven't touched anything. I eat standing up at the kitchen counter. I shower with the bathroom light blazing, jumping at every drip of the faucet. Mrs. Gable hasn't spoken to me since I asked about the building. She just gives me wary, pitying looks when I pass her on the stairs, clutching my groceries like a shield. She knows. She's always known. Sometimes, in the dead silence of 3 a.m., I hear it. Not dragging anymore, something softer, a faint, rhythmic tap, tap, tapping. Like fingernails, gentle, patient, tapping against the inside of the wall shared with the vacant apartment. Right where my head rests on the pillow when I'm forced, by sheer exhaustion, to risk lying down. It's not trying to get in. It's reminding me it's there, that it's waiting, that this apartment isn't mine. It never was. It belongs to the one who rearranges the furniture, who organizes the chaos, who enforces its silent, suffocating order. And it has decided I am part of the furniture now, something to be positioned, managed, controlled. The tapping continues, steady, inexorable, like a clock counting down the seconds until I finally move just an inch out of place. This story ends here. It's time to move on to the next. I took a night shift in a haunted hotel where no one books room 9. I needed the money, desperately. After the layoff at the call center, the one where they called it restructuring but really just handed us pink slips and a lukewarm donut on the way out, I'd cycled through temp gigs that barely covered gas, let alone rent. So when old man Hargrove, the owner of the Everly Grand Hotel, offered me the night clerk position over lukewarm coffee at the diner, I didn't ask why the last guy quit after only 3 shifts. I just nodded and said, "When do I start?" The Everly Grand wasn't grand anymore. It was a hulking relic of the 1920s, wedged between a shuttered laundromat and a pawn shop on the edge of downtown. Once, it had hosted jazz-age celebrities and politicians. Now, it catered mostly to truckers passing through and the occasional couple looking for a cheap place to hide a hangover. The lobby still had marble floors and tarnished brass fixtures, but the carpet was worn threadbare in paths worn by decades of weary feet, and the chandeliers flickered with the erratic heartbeat of failing bulbs. Hargrove, gaunt and stooped in a moth-eaten cardigan, gave me the bare minimum tour. "Front desk is yours from midnight to 6, he rasped, his voice like gravel under a boot. "Guests check in before 11. Mostly just 3, 5, and 7 on the second floor get used. Room 12 on the third sometimes. Rest are storage." He paused outside a door on the second-floor hallway, his knuckles whitening around the cane he leaned on. His eyes darted toward the door marked with a tarnished brass 9. "Room 9, he said, voice dropping to a whisper, "is not to be entered, not by guests, not by staff, not ever. You see the lock? Keep it locked. If someone asks for it, tell 'em it's flooded, or under renovation, or full of bees. Anything. Just don't let them in, and don't go in yourself." He wouldn't say why, just shook his head, muttered about old business, and shuffled off, leaving me standing in the dim corridor, with the weight of that single locked door pressing against my back. My first night was quiet, eerily so. The hotel was empty, except for a trucker snoring in room 3. I sat at the scarred wooden desk, under the weak glow of a green-shaded lamp, reading a dog-eared paperback and jumping at every creak of the old building settling. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, soft at first, like water dripping, but the sound wasn't coming from the pipes. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Click, click, click. Like high heels on hardwood. I froze, listening. It seemed to come from the hallway outside the front desk. Near the staircase leading up to the second floor, I grabbed the heavy flashlight from under the desk, more for comfort than utility, and crept to the archway. The hallway was empty. The carpet muffled sound, but the click, click, click was still there, faint now, drifting from somewhere upstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice too loud in the silence. Nothing answered, just the dripping sound, retreating further away until it vanished entirely. I chalked it up to nerves. Old buildings make noises. Rats, maybe, or wind finding its way through cracks I couldn't see. I went back to my desk, but sleep was impossible. Every shadow in the lobby seemed to shift. Every tick of the grandfather clock behind me felt like a countdown. The second night, things escalated. Around 1 a.m., the fire alarm blared, a short, sharp shriek that cut through the silence like a knife. I scrambled to the panel behind the desk. No smoke, no heat sensors triggered, just the alarm wailing insistently for 30 seconds before cutting off as abruptly as it started. My hands were shaking as I checked the system log. Nothing. Blank. Like it had never happened. Then at 3:17 a.m., the phone on the desk rang. I nearly fell off my stool. No one ever called the front desk at night. Guests used the room phone if they needed anything, and there was no one else in the building. I let it ring 3 times before picking up, my throat dry. "Everly Grand, how can I—" Static hissed down the line. Then a voice, female, young, terrified. "Help me, please. I can't get out. The door, it won't open." The words were choked, punctuated by ragged breathing. "Room 9. I'm in room 9. My blood went cold. "Room 9 is locked," I stammered. "No one's in there. It's not occupied." "It is now," she sobbed. I walked in. I don't know how. It was open, and now it's locked from the outside. Please, the mirrors, they're watching me." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the receiver clutched in my hand, the dial tone buzzing mockingly in my ear. It couldn't be real. It had to be a prank. But the voice, it had been so raw, so genuinely panicked. And the mention of mirrors. Hargrove hadn't said anything about mirrors. I spent the rest of the night staring at the staircase, half expecting to see that girl stumble down, pale and wide-eyed. Nothing happened. At 6 a.m., when Hargrove shuffled in for his morning coffee, I blurted out the story. He didn't look surprised, just weary. "Told you," he said, stirring sugar into his mug with a trembling hand. "Room 9 doesn't take kindly to callers or guests or questions." He wouldn't say more. The third night, I brought my phone. Not for calls. Reception was spotty in the lobby, but to record anything strange, maybe proof, maybe just for my own sanity. The hotel felt heavier that night, the air thick and stale, like it hadn't been breathed in years. Around midnight, the temperature in the lobby dropped suddenly. My breath fogged in front of me. The green lamp flickered, casting long, leaping shadows. Then the piano in the sunken parlor, a grand, dust-covered instrument I hadn't even noticed before, began to play. Not a full song, just a single melancholic note. Held. Then another. Slow, hesitant, like someone learning or remembering. I crept toward the archway, phone held out, recording. The parlor was dark, moonlight streaming through tall, grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The piano bench was empty, but the keys were moving, depressing slowly, one by an invisible hand. I stopped recording. My hands were icy. This wasn't rats. This wasn't the wind. This was something else, something that knew I was watching. I retreated to the desk, locking the parlor door from my side, a flimsy lock, but it made me feel marginally safer. Hours crawled by. Just before 4 a.m., I heard the click, click, click again. Closer this time, right outside the front desk archway. I held my breath, peering into the gloom. A figure stood there. She was tall, dressed in a pale, old-fashioned nightgown that might have been white once, but was now stained, yellow with age. Her hair was long and dark, hanging in wet strands around a face that was pale as bone. But it was her eyes that froze me, wide, black, and utterly empty. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me, at something beyond. Water dripped from the hem of a gown, pooling on the worn carpet. Click, click, click. Her bare feet made no sound, but the dripping continued, rhythmic as a metronome. She turned slowly, her head tilting at an unnatural angle, and looked directly at me. A smile touched her lips, a thin, humorless curve. Then she raised a hand, pale and dripping, and pointed toward the staircase, toward the second floor, toward room 9. She vanished, not like she walked away. One moment she was there, the next, the space was empty, only the damp spot on the carpet remaining. I didn't sleep for the rest of the shift. I sat rigid at the desk, every muscle clenched, jumping at the slightest sound. When dawn finally bled through the lobby. "Windows!" I packed up my things and walked straight to Hargrove's office. I told him I quit. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the rent. I'd rather sleep under a bridge. Hargrove just sighed, rubbing his temples. Figured you would, he said. They always do. He pulled a folder from a drawer and slid it across the desk. Before you go, maybe you should know. He tapped the folder. Her name was Elise Werner, stayed at the Everly Grand in 1931, young actress, supposed to be in some big picture, checked into room 9, was found dead 2 days later, drowned in her bathtub, only there was no water in the tub, not a drop. Coroner called it unexplained. He paused, his eyes distant. They say she was heartbroken, waiting for a lover who never came. That last night, she paced the hallway in her nightgown, dripping wet from a bath she'd taken, waiting. And when he didn't show, she just stopped waiting. But her body wouldn't stay dry, and her spirit, it won't stop pacing, won't stop waiting, and if anyone goes into room 9, she thinks they're him, and she won't let them leave. I stared at the folder, at the grainy black and white photo of a smiling, vibrant young woman with bright eyes. Nothing like the hollow thing I'd seen. Why doesn't anyone book it? I whispered. Because no one sane would, Hargrove said simply, and the ones who do, they never check out. I left the Everly Grand that morning, the weight of the place clinging to me like damp. I found another job, washing dishes in a greasy spoon diner, slept with the lights on for weeks. Thought I was free. Then last night, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Static. Then that voice. Not panic this time. Calm. Certain. You left, it said, but you saw me. You know where I am. Room 9 is waiting. The door, it's open now, just for you. The line went dead. I checked my phone. No missed call, no history, just the time. 3:33 a.m. And outside my window, 3 blocks away, I could just make out the silhouette of the Everly Grand against the pre-dawn sky. A single light burned in a second-floor window. Room 9. The phone in my hand vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Come home. This is where the story ends. Let's continue with the next. My childhood home still calls my name long after we moved out. I should have listened to my mother, not the frail, vacant-eyed woman in the Maplewood Gardens memory care unit who barely recognizes me anymore, but the fierce, practical woman she was 20 years ago when we packed our lives into cardboard boxes and U-Haul trailers, fleeing 47 Willow Creek Lane like refugees from a war only we could see. Her hands had been steady on the steering wheel that final afternoon, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to glance back at the 2-story colonial with its peeling white paint and the overgrown lilac bushes clawing at the porch windows. "Don't look back, Ben," she'd said, her voice tight, low. "Don't ever look back. And whatever you do, don't answer if it calls your name." I was 12. I thought she meant the sadness of leaving my room, my treehouse, the backyard where I'd buried a time capsule. I didn't understand she meant the house itself. I didn't understand it had a voice. We moved across the state, new town, new school, new house with bright, empty rooms that echoed. For years, it worked. The nightmares faded. The feeling of being watched from dark corners lessened. I buried Willow Creek Lane deep. A bad dream, best forgotten. My mother never spoke of it again, not even when the dementia began its slow, cruel theft of her memories a decade ago, until last Tuesday. I was visiting her during one of her rare moments of clarity. Her hand, papery and cool, gripped mine with surprising strength. Her eyes, clouded but focused, locked onto mine. "Ben," she whispered, her breath smelling faintly of antiseptic and applesauce. "The house. It's hungry again. It remembers you. It's calling." She fumbled under her thin hospital blanket and pressed something cold and metallic into my palm. The key. The old, tarnished brass key to the front door of 47 Willow Creek Lane. "You have to go," she rasped, "before it takes someone else. Like it took. Her eyes rolled back, the moment of lucidity gone as quickly as it came, replaced by vacant confusion. She started humming a nursery rhyme, off-key. I sat there, the cold weight of that key burning in my hand, the words echoing, its calling. I drove through the night. The familiar highway exits blurred past, each mile marker tightening the knot in my stomach. Dawn was just bleeding gray into the sky when I turned onto Willow Creek Road. The neighborhood looked smaller, shabbier. Lawns were patchy, driveways cracked, and there it was, 47 Willow Creek Lane. The lilac bushes were gone, replaced by weeds growing knee-high around the foundation. The white paint was almost entirely gone now, revealing gray, weathered wood beneath. The windows were dark, grimy eyes. The porch sagged dangerously on one side. It looked abandoned, forgotten, exactly as it should be. No one had lived there since us. The bank owned it now, a decaying monument to bad memories. Or so I thought. The key turned with a gritty resistance that sent shivers down my spine. The front door opened with the same long, mournful creak it always had. The smell hit me first. Not dust, not mildew. Underneath the decay was that old familiar scent, lemon oil polish, my mother's vanilla candles, and the faint, sweet, tangy aroma of the apple tree that used to grow by the back fence. It was the smell of home. And layered beneath it, almost imperceptible at first, was the other smell, the one I'd only ever noticed in the dead of night. Damp earth, wet stone, and something else, like old pennies left in the rain. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. The kind that presses on your eardrums. I stepped inside, my boots loud on the bare floorboards where the carpet had been ripped up. The hallway stretched before me, darker than it should have been, even with the dawn light filtering through the grimy front window. The staircase rose to the second floor, the banister coated in dust. My old room was at the top to the left, but it was the basement door tucked under the stairs that drew my gaze. It stood slightly ajar, just like it always did when I was a kid. My mother had a rule: never go into the basement alone, never after dark. I never questioned it, not after the night I was 8, when I'd gone down to fetch the laundry basket and heard something, not a sound, a feeling, a cold, wet pressure against my ankle, like unseen hands trying to pull me down the steps. I'd scrambled back up, slamming the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. My mother found me hyperventilating on the kitchen floor. She never explained what I'd felt. She just reinforced the rule, her face pale. I forced myself to look away from the basement door. I walked through the empty living room. My father's old armchair was gone, leaving a pale rectangle on the floorboards. The fireplace was cold, filled with debris. I went into the kitchen. The yellow tiles were cracked. The refrigerator stood open, empty and dark. And on the counter, right where my mother used to keep the fruit bowl, sat a single, perfect, impossibly ripe red apple. It glistened under the weak light from the window. It shouldn't have been there. No one had been here in years. I touched it. Cold. Unnaturally cold. I picked it up. The stem broke off easily, and a thin trickle of dark, viscous liquid, like old blood, oozed from the break. I dropped it, wiping my hand frantically on my jeans. The smell of decay intensified, thickening the air. I climbed the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. My old bedroom door was closed. I pushed it open. The wallpaper, dinosaurs chasing rockets across a blue sky, was peeling at the seams, faded almost to gray. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It looked small, smaller than I remembered, safe. I sat on the bare mattress frame, the springs groaning. For a moment, just a moment, the fear receded. It was just an old, empty house. My mother's dementia, the key, the apple, stress, grief. That's all it was. Then I heard it, faint at first, a whisper so soft it could have been the wind in the eaves. But there was no wind. The air was utterly still. Ben. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was layered, childlike, high-pitched, but underneath it a wet, guttural rasp, like stones grinding together underwater. It came from the hallway, from the direction of the stairs. Ben, come play. It was my voice, my 8-year-old voice, but twisted wrong. I stood up so fast I knocked over the empty lamp on the nightstand. The crash echoed like a gunshot. The whispering stopped. Silence crashed back, heavier than before. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. Nothing. Just the frantic hammering of my own heart. It's not real. It's the house settling. It's your mind. Your mother's words. But the cold certainty settled in my gut. It was real, and it knew I was here. I crept to the bedroom door, peering out into the hallway. Dust lay thick on the floorboards, undisturbed. No footprints. I moved slowly towards the top of the stairs, gripping the banister. The basement door downstairs was now wide open. A deeper darkness spilled out from the stairwell below, a darkness that seemed to swallow the weak light from the hallway window. And from that darkness came a sound, a slow, rhythmic drip, 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 like water falling into a puddle. But the house had been dry. The roof looked intact from outside. Ben, the whisper came again, closer this time, from the foot of the stairs. My childhood voice, thick with tears now. I'm cold, so cold. Come hold my hand. Every instinct screamed to run. Out the front door, down the street, never look back. But another thought, colder and more insistent, rooted me to the spot. What if it has her, my mother's words, before it takes someone else? Was it calling to me, or through someone else? Someone it had already taken? The image of my mother's vacant eyes filled my mind. Was this why she forgot? Because part of her was still here, trapped in the dark? I took a step down. The old wood groaned under my weight. The dripping sound stopped. The whispering stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, oppressive, waiting. I took another step, and another. The air grew colder with each step, the smell of damp earth and pennies thickening until I could taste it. At the bottom of the stairs, the darkness was almost complete. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, my fingers numb. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh blue-white circle of light on the basement floor. The beam illuminated cracked concrete, old paint cans, and stacks of mildewed cardboard boxes. But it also caught the edge of something else. Small worn sneakers, child-sized, bright blue, covered in mud, my sneakers. From when I was 10, they shouldn't be here. We'd taken everything. And beside them, leading away from the stairs towards the far corner where the furnace hulked like a sleeping beast, were wet footprints. Small footprints, fresh, glistening in the phone light. "Ben," the whisper came from the corner near the furnace. My voice again, but strained, choked. "You came back. I knew you would. It let me wait for you." I followed the footprints with the light. They stopped abruptly at the base of the furnace. The beam trembled in my hand as I swept it upwards. Taped haphazardly to the metal side of the furnace, half hidden by cobwebs, was a drawing. Crayon on construction paper. I remembered making it. I was 7. It showed our house, with a smiling sun above it. But in the window of the basement, drawn in thick, angry black crayon, was a face. A face with too many teeth and hollow, empty eyes. And scrawled at the bottom in my messy child's handwriting, "It lives here. It likes my voice." The whisper came again, not from the corner, but from right behind me, close enough that I felt the cold, damp breath on the back of my neck. My own voice, but layered with that wet, grinding rasp. "It's so dark down here, Ben, but it sings to me. It sings with my voice. Now it wants yours." I spun around, phone light swinging wildly. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the bottom of the stairs. Standing there, barely visible in the gloom, was a shape, small, wearing the blue sneakers. But the body was wrong, hunched, the head tilted at an unnatural angle, and a face. It wasn't a face. It was a shifting, wet darkness, but within it, 2 points of faint, sickly green light glowed where eyes should be. It reached out a hand, small, pale, but the fingers were too long, the nails blackened and sharp. It made the same wet, gurgling sigh my mother had made in the hospital when the lucidity slipped away. "Come closer," it whispered with my stolen voice. "It's time to sing." I stumbled backwards, crashing into the furnace. The phone clattered from my hand, skittering across the concrete, the light beam spinning crazily, throwing monstrous, leaping shadows on the walls. In the strobing light, I saw more drawings taped to the furnace, to the support beams. Dozens of them. Crayon drawings of children, different children, some in old-fashioned clothes. All with the same hollow eyes drawn in black, all with the same words scrawled beneath. "It likes my voice." The spinning light settled, pointing towards the far wall, and there, half hidden behind a stack of rotten boxes, I saw the source of the dripping sound, a dark stain spread across the concrete floor, seeping from a crack in the foundation wall. But it wasn't water. It was thick, dark red, and it was moving, not flowing. Crawling. Tendrils of it snaked across the floor towards my dropped phone, towards my boots. Where it touched, the concrete, the stone, seemed to soften, to breathe. The small figure took another step forward. The green eyes flared brighter. The whisper became a chorus, layered with the voices of other children, other stolen names. "Stay, play, sing, feed us." The wet footprints on the floor began to glow with that same sickly green light. The dripping stain pulsed. The house itself seemed to inhale, the air pressure dropping, making my ears pop. The temperature plummeted. My breath fogged in the phone's beam. And beneath the child voices, I heard it. The true voice of the house. Not a whisper, a deep subterranean thrumming, vibrating up through the concrete into my bones, a sound of immense ancient hunger. It wasn't haunted. It was alive. And it had been waiting for me, for my voice, for the echo of the child who had lived here, the child whose fear it had tasted all those years ago and found delicious. The small figure lunged, not fast, but with terrifying inevitability. I kicked out blindly, my boot connecting with something cold and yielding. It let out a shriek, a wet, tearing sound that wasn't human, wasn't childlike, but a raw, animal thing of rage and hunger. I scrambled for the stairs, slipping on the damp concrete, my hands scrabbling for purchase on the rough wood of the stair treads. I could feel the cold radiating from the thing behind me, smell the rot on its breath, hear the chorus of stolen voices rising in a fever pitch. "Don't leave us! Sing for us! Feed us!" I burst through the basement door at the top of the stairs, slamming it shut behind me. I fumbled for the deadbolt, rusted, stiff. I threw my weight against it. Clunk, locked. Just as something heavy thudded against the other side, the wood groaned, the door handle rattled violently, then stopped. Silence. But the cold seeped through the wood, and the whispering started again, not through the door this time, but inside my head. My own childhood voice, clear and bright, singing the lullaby my mother used to sing. "Hush now, baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." But the words twisted in my mind. "Hush now, Ben, don't run away. The house is hungry. Come and stay." I leaned against the door, gasping, sweat freezing on my skin. The hallway was dark. The front door was only 20 feet away, an impossible distance. The lights flickered overhead, bare bulbs hanging from chains, then died completely, plunging the house into near darkness. Only the faint gray light from the front window remained, and in that gloom I saw them, shapes detaching themselves from the deeper shadows of the living room doorway. Small shapes, 3 of them, wearing clothes from different eras, a boy in knickers and a newsboy cap, a girl in a pinafore dress, a teenager in 80s jeans. Their faces were indistinct smudges of shadow, but their eyes glowed that same sickly green. They didn't walk. They slid across the floorboards, silent, except for the faint, wet sound of their passage. They fanned out, blocking the path to the front door. Their whispers joined the chorus in my head, a cacophony of stolen childhoods. Stay, sing, belong. The basement door behind me creaked open a fraction of an inch. The cold intensified. The dripping sound started again, louder now, echoing up the stairwell. Drip, drip, drip. It wasn't just blood. It was the sound of the house breathing, waiting for its next meal, its next voice. I backed away from the basement door, towards the stairs. The small figures advanced, their green eyes fixed on me. The lullaby in my head swelled, drowning out my own thoughts. "And if that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring." But the house's voice wove through it. "And if that boy won't sing for me, the basement floor will set him free." I reached the bottom of the stairs. No escape that way. The front door was blocked. The kitchen led to the back door, maybe. I darted sideways towards the kitchen archway. The figures moved faster than I expected, gliding to intercept me. One reached out. Its hand passed through the weak light from the window, and for a second I saw it wasn't flesh. It was made of that same dark, crawling stain from the basement, shot through with veins of that eerie green light. It brushed my arm. The cold wasn't just on my skin, it shot into my bones, into my chest. My heart stuttered, my breath fogged thickly in the air, and the whispering, it wasn't just in my head anymore, it was in my throat. My jaw muscles tightened, my lips parted. Against my will, my voice, my real voice, but thin and strained, began to form the words of the lullaby. Hush. Now, baby. Panic surged. I clamped my hand over my mouth, biting down on my palm until I tasted blood. The pain broke the compulsion. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that tore through the house's silence. The effect was instantaneous. The green-eyed figures flinched back as if burned. The whispering in my head faltered. The basement door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The dripping stopped. For 3 heartbeats, there was only my ragged breathing and the frantic pounding in my ears. Then, from the basement, a new sound began. Not dripping, not whispering, a slow, deliberate dragging, heavy, wet, like something large being pulled across concrete, and beneath it, that deep, subterranean thrumming grew louder, angrier. The floor vibrated, dust sifted from the ceiling. The house wasn't playing anymore. It was coming for me. I didn't think. I ran, not toward the blocked front door, but through the kitchen. The back door was warped, swollen shut. I threw my shoulder against it, once, twice. Wood splintered around the lock. I stumbled out into the overgrown backyard, falling onto my hands and knees in the tall, wet grass. I scrambled up, not daring to look back, and ran for the street. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, leaning against a lamppost, gasping, my clothes soaked with dew and sweat, my arm burning where the shadow hand had touched me. I called the realtor from a gas station payphone, told them the house was unstable, dangerous. They sent someone. The front door was locked tight. The basement door was sealed shut with fresh, heavy-duty padlocks that hadn't been there the day before. No sign of forced entry, no sign of me. The realtor thought I was hysterical, stressed, grieving my mother. They listed the house anyway, a bargain fixer-upper. My mother died last week. Peacefully, they said, in her sleep. When I went to collect her few belongings from Maplewood Gardens, the nurse handed me a small box. She kept asking for this, she said gently. Inside was a child's drawing, my drawing, the one of the house with the face in the basement window, but someone had added to it, in shaky adult handwriting that I recognized as my mother's, written around the edges of the paper like a desperate prayer. It calls in their voices. It hungers for the sound of home. Don't answer. Don't look back. Break the key. And tucked into the corner of the frame was the brass key to 47 Willow Creek Lane. Cold, heavy. I didn't break it. I couldn't. It feels like the only thing tethering me to her, to what she tried to protect me from. I live in a 3rd-floor apartment now. Concrete walls, no basement. I keep the lights on all night. But sometimes, in the deepest part of the silence, when the city outside finally quiets down, I hear it, faint at first, a whisper on the edge of sleep. My mother's voice, young and strong again. Ben, sweetheart, time for bed. Then it shifts, becomes my own childhood voice, small and scared. Mommy, there's something under my bed. It's singing. And underneath both, that wet, grinding rasp, the sound of stones in deep water, humming a lullaby I know by heart. The key sits on my nightstand, cold, waiting. And the worst part isn't the fear. It's the terrible, seductive pull in that whisper. The part of me that remembers the warmth of that old kitchen, the safety of my room before the shadows learned my name. The part that wonders, in the fragile hours before dawn, if the singing might not be so bad, if the hunger might finally be quieted, if I just answered back. The dripping has started again, not from the ceiling, from the key. Drip, drip, drip. Midnight is coming, and the house remembers the way home. It always remembers. And that is the end of this story. Now let's begin a new one. I found letters from a dead tenant, and now they want an answer. The rent was suspiciously cheap. That should have been my first warning. But when your bank account reads 3 figures and the only alternative is your sister's couch, which already groans under the weight of her 2 toddlers and her patients, you learn to ignore red flags the size of bed sheets. The listing for the attic studio above Mrs. Gable's dusty antique shop on Elm Street promised charm, character, and quiet. It delivered the first 2 in spades. The quiet? That was the problem. It wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the thick, watchful silence of a held breath, the kind that presses on your eardrums until you hear your own pulse thudding in your skull. Moving in was a blur of boxes, sweat, and the pervasive smell of old wood, dust, and the faint, cloying sweetness of lavender that seeped up from the shop below. The studio itself was a long, narrow space under the eaves, with sloped ceilings that forced me to duck near the walls, and one small, grimy window overlooking the tangled alley behind the building. The previous tenant, the landlord Mr. Finch had mumbled offhandedly over the phone, had moved on suddenly. No forwarding address, just left the key under the mat. Finch, a man whose voice sounded like gravel in a tin can, hadn't even shown me the place. "Keys in the mailbox," he'd rasped. "First month's rent in cash. Slide it under my door." He sounded less like a landlord and more like a ghost, negotiating with another ghost. The first week was uneventful. Just the unfamiliar creaks and groans of an old building settling. The distant chime of the antique shop doorbell, the muffled sounds of the city below. I buried myself in freelance graphic design work, trying to ignore the way the shadows in the corners seemed deeper than they should be, the way the single overhead bulb flickered with a sickly yellow pulse if I stared at it too long. The quiet, however, began to fray at the edges of my concentration. It wasn't just absence of sound, it was an expectation. Like the room itself was waiting for me to say something, to acknowledge its presence. I found the letters on a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the small attic window, turning the alley into a gray watercolor smear. I was reorganizing a rickety old wardrobe, the only storage besides a few shelves, to make space for my winter coats. Behind a stack of yellowed, moth-eaten sweaters that smelled faintly of camphor, my fingers brushed against something smooth and cool, not fabric, paper, bundled together with a faded blue ribbon, stiff with age. It was a stack of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to a single name in a looping, elegant script that felt both feminine and strangely urgent: Eleanor Vance. The return address on every envelope was identical: 7 Blackwood Lane, apartment 3BA. My blood ran a degree colder. 7 Blackwood Lane was the address of this very building. Apartment 3B was my studio. The letters weren't postmarked. They hadn't been sent through the mail. They'd been hidden, left behind. My rational mind screamed, "Private property, throw them out, don't snoop." But the silence of the room seemed to lean in, pressing on my temples. Curiosity, that old fatal flaw, won. I sat cross-legged on the worn rug, the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, and untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated October 12th, 1978. The paper was thin, fragile, the ink slightly blurred in places as if touched by damp fingers or tears. Dearest Eleanor, another night, another silence from you. The silence here is different now. It's not the quiet of an empty room. It's a listening quiet. The walls, they seem to hold their breath when I enter. The faucet in the sink drips a single drop at exactly 3:17 a.m. Every night I've tried tightening it. It doesn't help. I think it's counting. I found a hairpin today. Not mine. Silver with a tiny pearl. It was on the floorboards near the wardrobe, just like the one you lost last summer, remember? The one your mother gave you? I left it on the windowsill in case. Please, Ellie, if you're getting these, just write back. One word. Anything. I know you're angry. I know I shouldn't have, but I miss you so terribly. The silence is eating me alive. Yours, always. Thomas. My skin prickled. Thomas. The name felt heavy, loaded. I flipped to the next letter. October 18th. Ellie, the hairpin is gone. I checked the windowsill this morning. Vanished. But the dripping, it's faster now. 3:10 a.m. And there's a new sound, a scratching, inside the walls, like tiny fingernails, or maybe just mice. But it sounds deliberate, purposeful. I saw Mrs. Gable downstairs. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just clutched her rosary tighter and muttered about bad bones in the building. What does that mean? Do you know something, Ellie? Did you know what this place was before you left me here? I'm so tired. The silence isn't just in the room. It's in my head. It's shouting. Tad. The letters continued, a desperate, deteriorating chronicle over the next few weeks. Thomas wrote of cold spots that followed him, of the wardrobe door creaking open by itself in the dead of night, of finding his clothes neatly folded on the bed when he left them crumpled on the floor. He wrote of smelling lavender, Mrs. Gable's lavender, when the shop was closed. He wrote of seeing fleeting movements in his peripheral vision, of a woman's face, pale and sad, reflected for a split second in the dark window pane. He became convinced Eleanor was trying to communicate through the house itself, punishing him for some unnamed transgression. His handwriting grew increasingly frantic, the ink blotted and smeared. October 28th, 1978. She's here, Ellie, not you, her, the one from the window. She stands in the corner by the wardrobe now. I can feel her cold breath on my neck when I sleep. She doesn't speak. She just watches, waits. And the letters. I found another one today, tucked into the pages of the book I left on the nightstand. Blank pages, just the envelope addressed to you. How? I think she wants me to write, to keep writing to you, to feed the silence with my words. But what if I stop? What if I burn these letters? October 30th, 1978. I can't sleep. The dripping is constant now. The scratching is inside the walls, inside my head. She stood over my bed last night. I felt her hand on my forehead, cold as marble. She whispered, "Write her." Her voice wasn't yours, Ellie. It was dry, like stones grinding in a deep well. I have to write. I have to answer. Maybe if I say I'm sorry enough, she'll let me go. Maybe if I tell you everything. The rest of the page was violently torn away, the ragged edge stained with something dark that wasn't ink. The final letter was undated. The paper was stiff, damp-stained, the handwriting a barely legible scrawl. The ink faded to a rusty brown. Eleanor, I know now. I know what you did. You left me here for her. You knew she hungers for voices, for words, for the sound of a living heart beating in her walls. You sacrificed me to keep her quiet, to keep her away from you. It's too late for sorry. The letters are her food. My words are her chains. She won't let me leave until I've written enough, until I've filled the silence with my misery, until it bursts. If you're reading this, if anyone is reading this, don't write back. Don't answer. She only wants a voice. Don't give her yours. Burn these. Burn them all before. The sentence ended in a long, jagged smear of that same rusty brown, as if the pen had been dragged violently across the page before being dropped. There was no signature, just the stain. I sat frozen on the rug, the rain forgotten. The silence in the attic studio wasn't just watchful anymore. It was hungry. Thomas Vance. He hadn't moved on. He'd vanished, died here, and his ghost, or the thing that had consumed him, was still here, trapped by his own unanswered letters. And I'd found them, I'd read them, I'd given the silence a voice again. The overhead bulb flickered violently, then died completely, plunging the room into gray twilight. The rain outside seemed to muffle, as if the world beyond the window had been wrapped in cotton wool. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, and a new sound, faint at first, a soft, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch from inside the wardrobe, like fingernails on wood, exactly as Thomas had described. My blood turned to ice. I scrambled back, knocking over the empty teacup I'd left on the rug. It shattered on the floorboards, the sound impossibly loud in the suffocating quiet. The scratching stopped. The silence slammed back down, heavier than before. Then a single fat drop of water hit the floor near my foot. Plink! From the ceiling, I looked up. The plaster was dry. Another drop fell. Plink! Then another. Plink! Forming a small dark puddle on the worn rug. Not water. It was thick, viscous, the same rusty brown as the stain on Thomas's final letter. From a corner by the wardrobe, the cold began. Not just cold air. A deep, bone-chilling cold that radiated outwards, frosting my breath in the dim light. And with it came the smell. Not lavender, not dust. The cloying sweetness of decay mixed with the metallic tang of old blood. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of waiting. A whisper, dry and papery, like dead leaves skittering across stone, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It spoke Thomas's final desperate warning, but twisted, layered with a wet, guttural undertone. Don't answer? But it wasn't a command. It was a challenge, an invitation. The next morning, I tried to be rational. I gathered the letters, intending to burn them in the small, rusted metal trash can I used for my sketch paper. I lit a match. The flame sputtered and died before it touched the paper. I tried again. Same thing. A third match snapped in my fingers. The letters felt unnaturally cold. I shoved them back into the wardrobe, deep behind the moth-eaten sweaters, my hands trembling. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress, sleep deprivation, the weight of the old building. That night, I woke at 3:10 a.m., not 3:17, 3:10. The dripping started. Plink, plink, plink. From the ceiling directly above my narrow bed, I lay rigid, eyes wide in the darkness, listening to the slow, deliberate drops of that dark fluid. The scratching began inside the wall beside my head. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Patient, insistent, waiting for a response. I lasted 3 days. 3 days of the dripping, the scratching, the bone-deep cold that followed me from room to room, the oppressive weight of the silence that seemed to press in tighter every time I opened my mouth to speak, only to find my words dying in my throat. The smell of decay clung to my clothes. Sleep was impossible. My work suffered. My hands shook constantly. The letters weren't just hidden, they were a beacon, and the thing in the walls had my name now. It knew I'd read them. It knew I understood. The breaking point came on the 4th night. I was sitting at my small desk, staring blankly at my computer screen, the cursor blinking accusingly. The silence was a physical pressure. The cold spot by the wardrobe had grown, filling half the room. The dripping was constant now, a slow, maddening rhythm from the ceiling. Plink, plink, plink. Then a new sound, a soft thump from inside the wardrobe, like something heavy being placed on the shelf. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I stood up, my legs weak, and walked slowly to the wardrobe. My hand shook as I grasped the tarnished brass knob. I pulled the door open. On the top shelf, placed with deliberate care on a folded yellowed handkerchief, was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, unlined, and a fountain pen. The same kind of pen, I realized with a fresh wave of terror, that Thomas had used. The pen was uncapped. A single drop of that same rusty brown ink hung precariously from its nib. My breath fogged in the freezing air. I didn't touch it. I just stared. The silence deepened, becoming a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. The whisper came, not dry this time, but wet, intimate, as if spoken directly into my ear. Right. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the only sound left in the world. The dripping, the scratching, the cold, all of it coalesced into that single, imperative word. Right. The pen seemed to pulse with a dark light. The blank paper was a void waiting to be filled. With what? An apology? A plea? Thomas's final warning screamed in my mind, "Don't answer. Don't give her yours." But the silence was so loud, the cold was so deep, the weight of Thomas's unanswered pain, trapped for nearly 50 years, pressed down on me. Maybe if I wrote, I could set him free. Maybe I could reason with it. Maybe I could be the voice that finally said the right thing, the words that would break the chain. My hand moved before my mind could stop it. I picked up the pen. It was ice cold, heavy, vibrating faintly with a deep subterranean hum. The ink on the nib smelled like copper and earth. I sat at my desk, the blank paper before me. The dripping stopped. The scratching stopped. The silence held its breath, waiting for my words. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and rich. My own handwriting, usually neat and precise, seemed to twist and warp under its influence, becoming loopy, frantic, eerily reminiscent of Thomas's final scrawl. "I've found your letters." The words wrote themselves. I couldn't stop them. The pen moved with a will of its own, dragging my hand across the page. I read them all. I know about the dripping, the scratching, the cold. I know about her. I know you're trapped. I'm so sorry, Thomas. I'm so sorry she did this to you. Tears blurred my vision, hot against my cold cheeks. The pen kept moving, but I can't stay silent. The silence is killing me too. It's eating my thoughts, my sleep, my voice. Please, if you can hear me, tell me how to make it stop. Tell me what she wants. What do I need to say to set you both free? I signed it with my own name, my real name. The pen lifted from the paper, the silence shattered, not with sound, but with a wave of pure ecstatic relief that washed over me, warm and suffocating. The cold vanished. The oppressive weight lifted. For a moment, the attic studio felt almost normal. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered in my chest. Had I done it? Had I broken the cycle? Then the pen moved again. Not in my hand. It floated up from the desk, hovering in the air before the paper. The nib dipped into the inkwell that hadn't been there a moment before. A small, ornate well that seemed carved from black stone. And it began to write, not in Thomas's hand, in a script that was sharp, angular, and chillingly precise. A woman's hand, Eleanor's hand. Dear, my name, thank you for your kind words. It is so lovely to be heard again after all this time. Thomas was a foolish boy. He ran from his promises. He left me hungry. But you are different. You understand. You offer your voice willfully. That is a gift. She is pleased. She has waited so long for a new voice, one that is strong, one that can fill the silence for a very, very long time. Your letter is accepted. The answer is simple. Stay. Write to us again tomorrow night and every night after. Fill the pages with your fear, your regrets, your loneliness. She feasts on those most. We are waiting. Eleanor and she. The pen dropped onto the desk with a soft clatter. The black inkwell vanished. The dripping started again, not from the ceiling, from the letter itself. Thick, dark drops of that rusty fluid pooled on the cream paper, smudging the words, making them bleed and run like open wounds. Stay, stay, stay. The cold returned, colder than ever before. It wasn't just in the room. It was inside me, seeping into my bones, into the marrow of my fear. The whisper wasn't just in my ear anymore. It was in my head, in my blood. A chorus of two voices now, Thomas's desperate murmur and Eleanor's sharp, satisfied hiss, repeating the same words over and over. Stay, write, feed us. I tried to scream. No sound came out. My voice was already gone, claimed by the silence, promised to the thing in the walls. I looked at the wardrobe. It was open. Inside, on the floorboards where I'd found the letters, lay a fresh stack of cream-colored paper and a new bottle of that black, stone-carved inkwell. Waiting. The scratching began again, not inside the wall, but inside my own skull, a constant, maddening rhythm. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of my own thoughts being unraveled, prepared to be written down. The dripping formed a puddle around my bare feet on the floor, cold, wet, final. I don't sleep anymore. I sit at the desk. The pen is always in my hand. The paper is always waiting. The silence is never empty. It's full of her, full of Thomas, full of Eleanor, full of the hungry ancient thing that wears their names like a shroud. They watch me from the corners, from the wardrobe, from the very grain of the wood in the floorboards. Their eyes are the dark spots on the ceiling. Their breath is the cold that never leaves. I write about my terror, about the way the cold feels like worms burrowing under my skin, about the smell of decay that is now my own breath, about the dreams of Thomas, trapped in a room with walls made of his own unanswered letters, screaming silently as she peels the words from his soul. I write about Eleanor's cold satisfaction, her sharp eyes gleaming in the dark. I write about the landlord Finch, who knew, who left me here as an offering. I write about Mrs. Gable's lavender trying to mask the stench of the grave that rises from apartment 3B. They are never satisfied. The pages I fill vanish by morning, absorbed into the walls, feeding the silence, making it deeper, hungrier. I need more paper, more ink. My hands are stained brown. My eyes are sunken pits. The dripping is constant now, a small dark pool spreading across the floorboards around my chair. I drink it. It tastes like rust and regret. It keeps me awake. It keeps me writing. The pen moves. My hand is a puppet. The words flow. The silence grows. She is pleased. Thomas is quiet now. His hunger is sated by my voice. Eleanor watches, a ghost of a smile on her pale lips. And the thing that is neither of them, the ancient hunger in the bones of the house, stirs in its deep, dark place, content for now. But it will never be full. It will always need more words, more fear, more voice. I found the letters. I read them. I answered. And now I am the answer. My life, my breath, my very soul is the ink. The paper is the walls. The story is never finished. It only grows longer, darker, deeper into the silence. The rent is cheap for a reason. The attic studio doesn't need a tenant. It needs a scribe, a voice for the hungry dark. And I am writing. I am always writing. The scratching in the walls is just the sound of the house turning the pages, waiting for the next word, the next drop of blood ink, the next piece of my silence to devour. I can't stop. The pen won't let me. The silence demands its due. And I am so very tired, but the dripping hasn't stopped, and the cold hasn't lifted. So I write. I write until my fingers bleed onto the page, mixing with the ink. I write until my eyes blur. I write until the only sound left in the world is the scratch of the nib and the wet, satisfied sigh from the corner by the wardrobe. She is listening. She is waiting. And I am still here, still writing, still feeding the silence that will one day swallow me whole, leaving only these words behind, waiting for the next tenant to find them and answer. As this story comes to rest, a new whisper begins. I rented a room from Craigslist that has no photos. $350 a month. In this economy, in this city, that number doesn't imply a bargain. It implies a crime scene. I knew that. I wasn't naive. But when you're 3 months behind on student loans and your freelance graphic design gig has dried up into a desert of unanswered emails, you stop looking for red flags and start looking for a roof. The listing on Craigslist had no photos, just text. Room for let. Large historic home, East 4th Street. Quiet. Cash only. I met the landlord, Mr. Giles, on a Tuesday evening. It was raining, that heavy, cold November rain that smells like rusted metal and wet asphalt. The house was a looming Victorian thing, painted a peeling, sickly yellow that looked like bruised skin under the streetlights. It sat on a corner lot, overgrown with ivy that had choked the life out of the porch railings. Giles was a small man, nervous, smelling of mothballs and peppermint schnapps. He didn't look me in the eye. He handed me the keys after counting my cash with shaking fingers. "You're the only one here right now," he mumbled, looking at the dark windows of the second floor. "Other tenant left. Quickly. Keeps to himself mostly anyway. It's quiet. You'll like the quiet." I didn't ask why the other tenant left. I just wanted the key. My room was on the first floor at the back of the hallway, past the grand staircase that groaned even when you just looked at it. The room was big, I'll give it that. High ceilings, crown molding that was thick with decades of painted-over dust, and a single, large window that looked out onto a backyard that was essentially a mud pit filled with brambles. I moved in that night. I had 2 suitcases, a sleeping bag, a laptop, and a box of ramen. I set up my office on a card table I found in the closet. The closet was weirdly deep, smelling of cedar and something sweeter, like rotten apples. I closed the door and pushed the table against the opposite wall. The first 3 nights were fine. It was just the adjustment period. Old houses make noise. They settle. Wood contracts in the cold. Pipes hammer when the heat kicks on. I told myself this every time the floorboards above my head creaked. Just the house settling. But the settling had a rhythm. It started on the 4th night. I was working late, trying to salvage a logo design for a client who hated everything I did. It was 2 a.m. The silence in the house was heavy, the kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. Thump. It came from directly above me, a soft, dull impact, like a bag of wet sand dropped on the floor. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse. I waited. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Something was being dragged. It was slow, agonizingly slow. It sounded like fabric moving over rough wood. It moved from the center of the room above to the corner. Then it stopped. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid immediately. "Is someone up there?" Silence. I assumed it was the other tenant Giles had mentioned, though I hadn't seen a single sign of life. No mail in the hallway, no boots by the door, no lights in the upstairs windows when I came home. I put my headphones on, turned up the white noise playlist, and went to sleep. The next day, I went upstairs. I told myself I just wanted to introduce myself, to ask them to keep it down at night. The staircase was freezing. The air got colder with every step. At the top of the landing, there were 3 doors. 2 were open, revealing empty bedrooms with bare mattresses and dust motes dancing in the gray afternoon light. The 3rd door, directly above my room, was closed. I knocked. The wood felt damp, sticky. "Hello? Neighbor?" No answer. I knocked harder. The door rattled in its frame. It was locked. Not just locked, but jammed. I tried the handle and it didn't give a millimeter. I put my ear to the wood. I heard breathing. It wasn't normal. Breathing. It was wet, rattling. A slow, labored intake of air followed by a gurgling exhale. It sounded like someone with pneumonia or someone drowning very, very slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. The breathing stopped instantly. I backed away. "Okay, sorry to bother you." I retreated to my room and locked the door. I called Giles. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Hey, I think the guy upstairs is sick. He sounds bad." Giles never replied. A week passed. The noises changed. The thumping stopped, replaced by pacing, relentless pacing. It would start at midnight and go until 4 in the morning. Creak, step, creak, step. It was a heavy, limping gait. One foot would land solid, the other would drag. I stopped sleeping. I started drinking too much coffee. My work suffered. I found myself staring at the ceiling, tracing the water stains that looked like maps of countries that didn't exist. One particularly bad stain was right above my bed. It was dark brown, almost black in the center. I noticed it was getting bigger. On a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after moving in, the smell started. It wasn't a garbage smell. It was meaty. It smelled like raw copper and spoiled pork. It permeated everything, My clothes, my sheets, my hair. I bought air fresheners, candles, incense. Nothing touched it. It was coming from the ceiling. I went to the hardware store and bought a step ladder. I needed to see if a pipe had burst or if an animal had died in the crawl space between the floors. I set the ladder up under the dark stain. I poked it with the handle of a broom. The plaster was soft, spongy, drip. A single drop of dark, viscous fluid landed on my cheek. I wiped it off, panicked, scrubbing my face with my shirt. It was red, not bright red, but dark, maroon blood, old blood. I scrambled down the ladder and ran to the bathroom to wash my face. I scrubbed until my skin was raw. When I came back out, I looked up at the ceiling. The stain was pulsing. I swear to God it was expanding and contracting like a slow heartbeat. I should have left then. I should have packed my bags and slept under a bridge. But I was broke. I had $40 to my name until the next invoice cleared. I had nowhere to go. Logic is a dangerous thing when you're desperate. I rationalized it. It's a dead raccoon, I told myself. Fluids leak. Gravity pulls them down. It's disgusting, but it's physics, not ghosts. I taped a garbage bag over the ceiling stain to catch the drips and moved my bed to the other side of the room. That night, the house woke me up. It wasn't a sound. It was a change in pressure. My ears popped. I sat up, heart hammering against my ribs. The room was pitch black. The street lamp outside had burned out. I heard a sound from the corner of the room. The closet, the door, which I always kept latched shut because of the smell, was clicking. The latch was lifting. Click. The door creaked open about an inch. I held my breath. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to use the flashlight, but my hand knocked it off. It hit the floor with a loud clatter. From the closet, a voice whispered. It was my voice. "Who's there?" the closet whispered. It was a perfect recording of me asking that question the first night. The same inflection, the same tremor. I couldn't breathe. My throat seized up. "Is someone up there?" the closet voice asked, my voice again. Then a low, wet giggle, a sound I had never made. I lunged for the lamp switch. The bulb flashed once and blew out with a pop. Darkness again. "Giles," the voice said, but it wasn't my voice anymore. It was the landlord's. "Tenant left quickly." I scrambled out of bed, tangled in the sheets, and fell hard onto the floor. I crawled toward the hallway door. The closet door slammed open. It hit the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. I didn't look back. I got the hallway door open and sprinted. I didn't grab my laptop. I didn't grab my shoes. I ran out in my boxers and t-shirt, barefoot onto the cold, splintery floor of the hallway. I made it to the front door, locked. I fumbled with the deadbolt. My fingers were slippery with sweat. From the top of the stairs behind me, the breathing started. That wet pneumonia rattle, it was loud. Whatever was making it wasn't behind the door anymore. It was on the landing. I got the bolt violently thrown back and ripped the door open. I burst out onto the porch, gasped by cold night air. I ran down East 4th Street until my feet were bleeding and my lungs burned. I ran until I saw the fluorescent lights of a 24-hour gas station. I collapsed inside, crying, shaking so hard the attendant called the police. I told them someone had broken in. I didn't tell them about the voice. I didn't tell them about the blood. They wouldn't believe me. The police went to the house. They called me an hour later. "Mr. Evans," the officer said, sounding annoyed, We checked the place. It's secure. No sign of entry, but we need you to come down here. I'm not going back there, I said. Sir, you need to explain what's in the upstairs room. I don't know, I sobbed. I've never been in there. The door was locked. The door wasn't locked, the officer said. And there's no floor in that room, sir. It's just open joists. Looks like it's been that way for years. But we found your things. My things are downstairs, I said. No, the officer said, his voice dropping an octave. We found your laptop, your clothes, and your sleeping bag. They were arranged in the center of the upstairs room on top of some plywood planks, laid out like a little nest. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never put them there. And, sir, the officer hesitated, Mr. Giles, we looked him up to contact the owner. David Giles died 3 years ago. The house has been in foreclosure. It's been abandoned since 2021. I hung up. I slept in a shelter that night. I borrowed money from my estranged sister the next day and got a bus ticket out of state. I left everything, my computer, my clothes, my identity. But sometimes, when I'm in a quiet room or when I'm staying in a cheap motel and the ventilation turns off, I can still hear it. Not the breathing. I hear the recording. I hear me, whispering from the walls. You'll like the quiet, it says. You'll like the quiet. That concludes this story. A new one begins now. I rented an apartment where no one stays longer than one night. The listing was absurd. A one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city, walking distance to everything, with high ceilings and hardwood floors, available immediately for $450 a month. In this market, it had to be a scam or a trap. But my savings were evaporating faster than morning fog after the hospital job fell through, and my old place had been condemned after the fire. Desperation has a way of sanding down good sense. I clicked reply. The landlord, Mr. Eris Thorne, didn't ask for references, didn't run a credit check. He met me in front of 17B Elmwood Court, a crumbling brick building sandwiched between a shuttered laundromat and a pawn shop with barred windows. Thorne was a gaunt man in a threadbare suit that might have been dark blue once. His hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with an enormous tarnished key ring. His eyes darted everywhere but mine. Lease is month to month, he rasped, the words dry as dead leaves. Cash only, no deposit, no utilities included. You pay the meter yourself. He slid a single sheet of paper across the hood of his rusted sedan. The terms were sparse, the blanks for my name and signature glaringly empty. Just sign here, today's rent, and you can move right in. He avoided the building's entrance, gesturing vaguely towards the door with his chin. Apartment 3B, top floor, back stairs. He practically shoved the key, a heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key with a worn brass head, into my palm. It was ice cold. Welcome home, he muttered, already retreating to his car before I could ask why the rent was impossibly low. As he drove off, I saw him cross himself in the rearview mirror. The building smelled of damp plaster, stale cigarette smoke, and something else. A faint, sweetish odor, like overripe peaches left in a closed cupboard. The lobby was dim, lit by a single bare bulb dangling from a frayed wire. Post boxes lined one wall, most hanging open and empty. The back stairs were narrower than the front, carpeted in a threadbare, once-red runner that smelled faintly of mildew. The third-floor hallway was darker still. Only 2 apartments up here. 3A's door was covered in thick, yellowed newspaper taped over the peephole and cracks around the frame. 3B, mine, looked untouched. The lock was stiff, the door groaning open to reveal a surprisingly spacious room. High ceilings, yes. Original hardwood floors, scuffed but solid. A large window overlooking a tangled, overgrown courtyard. The kitchenette was cramped but functional. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub. It was dusty, neglected, but fundamentally sound, and so cheap. Relief washed over me, momentarily drowning out the building's unsettling smell. I'd found a lifeline. I hauled my few boxes up the back stairs as dusk fell. The streetlights outside cast long, distorted shadows through the grimy window. I swept and mopped, aired out the stale air, made the narrow bed in the corner. It felt good to be settled, safe. As I unpacked my meager kitchenware, I noticed something odd. The single overhead light in the main room flickered erratically. Not a bulb issue. I'd replaced it with a new one I'd brought. It pulsed, dimming and brightening like a slow, tired heartbeat. I tapped the fixture. It steadied. Probably just old wiring. The first disturbance came around 11:30 p.m. I was reading in bed, the only light coming from my small desk lamp. A sound from the kitchen, a soft clink, like a spoon tapping against a glass. I froze, listened. Silence. Probably just the building settling, old pipes. I dismissed it, turning a page. Then a low thump from the bathroom. Not a drip. A deliberate, heavy sound, like something being set down on the porcelain sink. My skin prickled. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded thin and ridiculous in the stillness. No answer. Just the oppressive quiet of the old building. I grabbed my phone, flashlight, app on, and crept into the kitchen. Nothing out of place. The sink was dry. The bathroom door was closed. I pushed it open. The small room was empty. The old mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, but the air was cool. I wiped the mirror with my sleeve. Staring back at me wasn't my own wide-eyed reflection. For a fraction of a second, I saw a woman's face, a pale oval, dark circles under the eyes, lips parted in a silent gasp. Then it vanished, leaving only my own startled face and the words, "Get out," smeared in the condensation where her mouth had been. I slammed the bathroom door shut, leaning against it, heart hammering. Hallucination, stress, lack of sleep. I repeated the words like a mantra. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, back against the wall, phone clutched like a talisman, the desk lamp blazing. The flickering overhead light had gone dark. Around 2:17 a.m., the exact time my phone glowed, the temperature plummeted. My breath fogged in the sharp artificial light. The sweet, cloying smell of overripe peaches filled the air, thick and nauseating. From the hallway outside my door came a slow, deliberate, dragging sound. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud, like something heavy being pulled down the hall. It stopped right outside my door. Silence. Then a soft, wet tap, tap, tap on the wood. Not a knock, a fingernail. I held my breath. The tapping stopped. The dragging sound started again, moving away towards the stairs. I peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the worn carpet directly opposite my door, a trail of dark, wet footprints led away, fading after a few steps. Dawn brought weak, gray light and a fragile sense of safety. I called Mr. Thorne. It went straight to voicemail. I left 3 increasingly frantic messages. No reply. I needed coffee. I needed air. I locked the apartment, taking the heavy brass key with me, and headed down the back stairs. On the second floor. Landing, I almost tripped over a small discarded object. A child's hair ribbon, faded blue satin, slightly damp. I picked it up. It smelled faintly of that same sickly, sweet peach odor. I dropped it like it was hot. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. I went next door to the pawn shop, buzzing with nervous energy. The owner, a burly man with tattooed knuckles named Sal, wiped his counter with a rag that looked dirtier than what he was cleaning. "Elmwood Court?" he snorted when I asked about the building. "That place? Yeah, I know it. Bad bones." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Landlord Thorne? Poor bastard's terrified of his own building. Won't set foot above the second floor. Says the top floor. It's got a taste." He tapped the side of his nose. "Apartment 3B? Honey, nobody stays in 3B. Not one night. Ever. They check in, they check out before sunrise. Sometimes they don't even take their suitcases. Just run." He saw my face. "You just move in last night? Jesus, get out. Now, while it's still light, don't wait for dark. That thing, it doesn't like being alone. It gets hungry after dark." My blood ran cold. The hair ribbon, the footprints, the face in the mirror. It wasn't stress. It was real. I ran back to 3B, fumbling the key into the lock. I had to pack, get out. Sal's words echoed, "It gets hungry after dark." I threw clothes into my duffel bag, my hands shaking. As I pulled a sweater from the closet, something fluttered to the floor. A piece of notepaper, yellowed and brittle. In a spidery, frantic hand it read, "It wants to be seen. It hates the dark. Don't let it trap you in the dark. The key is the only way." Below that, scribbled over and over like a desperate chant, "Don't sleep, don't sleep, don't sleep." The overhead light flickered violently, once, twice, then died completely, plunging her room into gloom. The sweet peach smell surged, thick enough to choke on. From the bathroom, the dripping started. Plink, plink, plink. But the faucet was off. I knew it was off. The dripping grew louder, faster, echoing unnaturally in the small space. Plink, 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 plink. And beneath it, a wet, gurgling sigh like water draining from a clogged sink. I backed towards the door, my duffel bag forgotten on the bed. The doorknob was freezing cold under my hand. I turned it. It wouldn't budge. Locked from the outside? Impossible. I'd just unlocked it. I rattled the handle. Nothing. The dripping stopped. The sighing stopped. Absolute silence. Then a soft click from the bathroom door. It swung slowly open. Darkness yawned beyond the threshold. But not empty darkness. A shape stood there, backlit by the weak gray light from the bathroom window, tall, too tall for the low-ceilinged room. Its limbs seemed elongated, jointed wrong. It didn't have a distinct head, just a smooth, featureless oval that caught the faint light like wet stone. In one long, thin hand, it held something dark and wet that dripped steadily onto the floorboards. Plink. The sweet smell intensified, now mixed with the coppery tang of blood. It took a step forward, silent except for the drip of that dark substance. The featureless head tilted. It didn't have eyes, but I felt its attention fix on me like a physical weight. A low, wet vibration filled the air, not a sound, but a tremor in my bones. A hunger that had nothing to do with food. Panic shattered my paralysis. I threw my shoulder against the apartment door. Once, twice. Wood splintered around the lock. I stumbled out into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. I fumbled for the key, my fingers numb with terror. I jammed it into the lock and turned. Click. I sagged against the wall, gasping, listening. Silence from inside 3B. No scratching, no dripping, just the frantic pounding of my own heart. I'd locked it in. I had to get out. Downstairs. Now. I fled down the back stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The building felt watchful. The shadows in the corners deeper than they should be. I burst out into the gray afternoon light, blinking. I needed to find Thorne, get my money back, get far away. I ran towards the street corner where I'd seen his car parked the day before. It was gone? Of course it was gone. I ducked into a dingy internet cafe a block over, my hands still trembling. I pulled up the listing for 17B Elmwood Court. It was gone, deleted, vanished from every rental site. A cold certainty settled over me. Thorne hadn't just rented me an apartment. He'd fed me to it. I couldn't stay out. I had nowhere else to go. My savings were almost gone. The cafe closed at 9 p.m. As dusk bled into the bruised purple of twilight, dread became a physical ache in my chest. I stood across the street from Elmwood Court, watching the windows of 3B, dark. All of them. The street lights flickered on, casting long, grasping shadows. I had to go back. Just for tonight. Just to get my things. I'd stay up all night. I'd be gone by dawn. Sal's words haunted me. Nobody stays in 3B. Not one night. The back stairs were darker than before. The sweet peach smell was stronger here, clinging to the air. The door to 3B was unlocked. I'd left it locked. I pushed it open slowly. The apartment was cold, colder than outside. The overhead light was dead. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside the window, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls. My duffel bag sat exactly where I'd left it on the bed. My unpacked boxes were undisturbed, but the furniture, it was rearranged. The small table and 2 chairs were pushed against the far wall, stacked precariously. The armchair was shoved into the corner, facing the wall, and the bed had been dragged into the very center of the room, positioned directly under the flickering light fixture. The sheets were pulled tight, smooth, inviting. On the pillow lay the faded blue hair ribbon. My breath fogged in the freezing air. It wants to be seen. It hates the dark. The note, the key. I clutched the cold brass key in my pocket. The key is the only way. Way out or way in? The dripping started again, not from the bathroom this time, from the ceiling above the bed. Plink, a single fat drop of dark liquid landed on the pristine white sheet. Plink, another. Plink. It wasn't water. It was thick, viscous. The smell of peaches and blood was overwhelming. From the deepest shadow in the corner where the armchair had been, a sound began, not dripping, not sighing, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood, slow, patient, waiting. The shadow began to deepen, to coalesce. The tall, elongated shape detached itself from the wall. It didn't walk. It flowed. Silent except for the endless tap, tap, tap of its long fingers against its own thigh, it stopped at the foot of the bed, the dark liquid still dripping from its unseen hand onto the sheet. The featureless head turned towards me. The wet vibration filled the room again, stronger now, hungrier. It reached out one long, dripping arm towards the bed, towards the smooth sheets, towards the space beside the pillow where the blue ribbon lay. The command wasn't spoken. It was implanted directly into my mind, cold and absolute, cutting through my terror. Lie down. My legs moved, not of my own will, step by step, drawn towards the bed like iron to a magnet. My body felt heavy, sluggish, responding to a will not my own. The cold intensified, seeping into my bones. The sweet, cloying smell filled my nose, my mouth. The tap, tap, tap grew louder, synchronizing with the frantic pounding of my heart. I reached the side of the bed. The sheets looked impossibly soft. The pillow looked warm. The vibration wasn't just hunger anymore, it was comfort, a promise of rest, an end to the running. The fear that had been a constant drumbeat since I stepped into this building began to soften, to blur at the edges. The cold wasn't unpleasant anymore. It was soothing, like sinking into deep, still water. Lie down. The thought was gentle now, seducing. Rest, be still, be seen. My knees touched the edge of the mattress. My hand brushed the damp sheet. The blue ribbon felt like silk against my fingertips. The shadowy figure stood motionless at the foot of the bed, waiting, patient. Its dripping hand hung loosely at its side. The streetlight outside flickered, casting its long shadow across the room, stretching towards me like a beckoning finger. The tap, tap, tap slowed, softened, became a lullaby. I'm writing this by the dim, flickering light of the dying overhead bulb. It's 3:07 a.m. The sheet beneath me is cold and damp. The sweet smell is everywhere. The shadow sits at the foot of the bed now, a silent sentinel. Its long fingers rest on the mattress near my feet. The dripping has stopped. The tapping has stopped. There is only the soft, wet vibration in the air, a deep, resonant hum that seems to come from the building's bones, from the bed frame itself. It's not frightening anymore. It's familiar, like a heartbeat I'd forgotten I had. Mr. Thorne will be coming soon. He always comes just before dawn to collect the key from under the mat. He won't find it. I won't be leaving, not this time. The apartment doesn't want me to leave. It has what it needs now, a witness, a companion in the dark. It hates being alone. It hates the dark. But I see it now. I see it clearly in the shadows, and in return, it lets me rest. The bed is so very comfortable. The cold is so very deep. The vibration is so very quiet. I understand now why no one stays longer than one night. They all ran, before it could show them the comfort of the stillness, before it could show them the peace of being seen. The light is flickering faster, dying. Soon the street lamp outside will go out too. The true dark will come, and in the dark it will lean closer. Its featureless face will hover near mine. It will share its silence, its stillness, its endless, hungry watch. I won't mind. I won't be afraid. I won't be alone. The key is cold in my hand where I clutch it against my chest. I don't need it anymore. There are no doors left to unlock, no doors left to lock. I close my eyes. The vibration deepens, filling my skull, my bones, my blood. It's not a sound. It's the sound of the building breathing, the sound of the dark. Finally satisfied, the last flicker of light dies. The shadows rush in, thick and warm as grave soil, and in the perfect, silent dark, the thing at the foot of the bed finally stops waiting. Its long, cold fingers brush my ankle. A sigh escapes its smooth, wet stone face. A sigh of relief, a sigh of homecoming. I don't pull away. I sink deeper into the mattress. The bed isn't in the center of the room anymore. The room has shrunk. Or perhaps I have. It doesn't matter. The tapping has started again, softly, rhythmically, on the headboard. Tap, tap, tap. Not a warning, an invitation. I open my mouth, not to scream, to answer. My voice is a dry whisper, lost in the deep, contented hum of the dark. I see you. I breathe into the perfect waiting silence. The fingers tighten gently on my ankle. The vibration swells, warm and heavy as a blanket pulled up to my chin. Dawn won't come for me. Dawn is for those who sleep alone. I close my eyes. The bed is so very warm now. The dark is so very bright, and I will never, ever have to leave. The tapping slows, fades, becomes the steady, comforting beat of my own heart. Finally at rest. The apartment is full. The hunger is quiet. And I am home. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. I thought the footsteps upstairs were my sister until I remembered I'm alone. The keys felt unnaturally heavy in my palm when Mrs. Gable pressed them into my hand. "The top floor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes darting toward the sagging porch roof of the old duplex. "Rent's cheap for a reason, dear." "Previous tenant?" Well, she left in a hurry, left most everything behind. She wouldn't meet my gaze, focusing instead on smoothing her flowered apron. "Just mind the stairs. They're steep, and the attic door at the top. Keep it locked, always locked." When I asked why, she just shook her head, a brittle smile cracking her lips. Some houses hold on to things. This one holds on to footsteps. She hurried back to her immaculate bungalow next door, leaving me standing alone on the cracked sidewalk with 2 battered suitcases and the echo of her warning hanging in the humid August air. I didn't care about footsteps. I cared about space. After the funeral home released Mom's ashes, cremated the same day she died of the aneurysm that stole her mid-sentence while she was arguing with the insurance company about Dad's old medical bills, I'd slept on my aunt's lumpy couch for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of hushed voices and pitying glances of feeling like a ghost haunting someone else's life. This creaking, peeling Victorian duplex, with its $350 a month top-floor apartment, was my escape, my silence, my grief. The stairs were steep, groaning under my weight, like old bones protesting. The top-floor hallway was narrow, dim, smelling of dust and lemon-scented wax. Mrs. Gable hadn't lied about the previous tenant. The apartment was furnished: a worn corduroy armchair, a thrift store dresser, a small kitchenette with mismatched dishes still in the cupboard. Even clothes hung in the closet, floral dresses, sensible sweaters, a pair of scuffed loafers. The air was thick, still, and carried a faint, sweet scent of lavender and something else, something damp, like earth after rain. I opened windows, letting in the drone of cicadas and the distant hum of the highway. For the first time in weeks, I breathed. That first night, I fell asleep to the sound of my own heartbeat in the unfamiliar quiet. I woke at 1:47 a.m. to the sound of footsteps, not loud, not threatening, just there. Slow, deliberate steps crossing the ceiling above my bed. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. The rhythm was familiar, comforting even. My sister Maya used to pace like that when she couldn't sleep, back and forth across her bedroom floor above mine, her slippers whispering against the rug. I'd lie in bed, listening, until her steps slowed, then stopped, until I heard her soft sigh as she finally sank onto her mattress. Mom would call up, "Maya, you all right, sweetie?" And Maya's muffled voice, thick with exhaustion, "Just thinking, Mama." I smiled into the darkness, tears pricking my eyes. It felt like a visitation, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this echoing house. I pulled a thin blanket tighter and drifted back to sleep. The phantom footsteps, a lullaby. The next night, they came again. Same time, same rhythm. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. I lay still, listening, letting the sound wrap around my loneliness like a worn sweater. But this time, a detail snagged at me. Maya always wore thick wool socks over her slippers when she paced on cold nights. These footsteps were barefoot, soft, almost liquid. The third night, I couldn't sleep. The grief was a physical ache behind my ribs. I sat up, hugging my knees, listening to the familiar sounds of the old house settling, the groan of pipes, the sigh of floorboards. Then, just after 1:45 a.m., the footsteps began. Closer this time, not just crossing the ceiling, stopping right above my bed. I held my breath, a soft tap, 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 followed like knuckles lightly rapping on wood. Maya used to do that too when she wanted my attention without waking Mom. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Maya?" I whispered into the darkness. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then a single soft sigh drifted down through the ceiling vent, a sigh that was unmistakably hers. I broke. Sobs racked my body, silent and desperate. "I miss you," I choked out. "I miss you so much." The sigh came again, closer now, seeming to fill the small room, and beneath it, a voice so faint it might have been the wind in the eaves. "I know." I spent the next day in a daze. Hope warred with disbelief. That night, I placed a glass of water and Maya's favorite strawberry lemonade on the nightstand, a childhood ritual when she'd had bad dreams. "For you?" I whispered before bed. When I woke, the glass was empty. The lemonade glass sat beside it, sticky with residue. My rational mind screamed coincidence, a draft, a mouse. But my heart knew Maya was here, with me. Then the footsteps changed. It started subtly. The rhythm grew uneven. Thump, thud, scuffle, thud. Heavier, less hesitant. One night, I woke to the sound of something being dragged across the floor above, a slow, grating scrape that ended with a muffled thump against the wall. The next night, the tapping returned, but harder, insistent. Rap, rap, rap. Right over my head, I called out, "Maya, what is it? What do you need?" Only silence answered. The lavender scent in the air turned cloying, thick with the damp earth smell I'd noticed on move-in day. And the room grew cold. Not just cool, biting cold that made my breath fog in the moonlight. I found the first message on the bathroom mirror the next morning, written in condensation, as if traced by fingertip. "Let me in." I scrubbed it away with trembling hands, telling myself it was just humidity. But that night, the footsteps were frantic. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. They circled the room above, faster and faster, shaking dust from the ceiling. The cold intensified, frosting the window pane. The lavender smell vanished, replaced by the sharp metallic tang of wet soil, and the voice no longer a sigh, a whisper layered with the sound of roots tearing through damp earth. "Open the door, please, it's dark, so dark." Panic cut through my grief. This wasn't Maya. Maya wouldn't terrify me. Maya wouldn't make the temperature drop 20 degrees. I locked my bedroom door. I pushed the heavy armchair against it. I slept with the lights on. The footsteps stopped, but the cold remained, and the smell of earth clung to my sheets. Mrs. Gable found me the next afternoon sitting on the porch steps, shivering in the August heat. She took one look at my face and sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "You heard her," she said. "Not a question." She led me to her tidy kitchen, poured 2 cups of tea, and told me about Eleanor Vance. Owned this duplex for 40 years, Mrs. Gable murmured, staring into her cup. Lived alone upstairs after her husband passed. Quiet woman. Kept to herself. Then 2 years ago, her sister moved in. Clara. Sickly thing. Cancer. Eleanor nursed her day and night. They were close. Like you and your sister, I'd wager. She paused, her knuckles white on the mug. Clara died upstairs, in that very apartment. Peacefully, they said, in her sleep. But Eleanor, she couldn't let go. Started hearing things. Footsteps. Whispers. Said Clara was cold. Said she wanted to come home. Mrs. Gable's eyes met mine, sharp and sad. Eleanor boarded up the attic door, nailed it shut, put salt lines on the floors, said the footsteps weren't Clara's, said something had followed Clara back from wherever she went, something that wore her voice, that hungered for the warmth of the living. I remembered the empty lemonade glass, the condensation on the mirror. Let me in. Eleanor tried to leave, Mrs. Gable continued, her voice dropping. Packed her bags one night. But when I checked on her the next morning, she was sitting in that armchair of yours, cold as ice, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The police said heart failure, stress. But I knew. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her skin was papery thin, ice cold. The footsteps didn't stop after she died. They got louder, angrier. The last tenant, a young man, he lasted 3 weeks, broke his lease. Said the thing upstairs screamed his name in his dead mother's voice. She squeezed my hand. Eleanor's sister, Clara. She wasn't just sick when she died. She was lonely. And loneliness, it's a door some things know how to open. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, a kitchen knife in my lap, every lamp blazing. 1:45 a.m. came and went. Silence. Then, just before 2 hot a.m., the footsteps began. Not upstairs. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle, coming down the stairs. My blood turned to ice. I was on the top floor. There was nowhere above me. The footsteps stopped outside my apartment door. The doorknob rattled gently. Click, click, click. I held my breath. The rattling stopped. Then a soft, familiar sigh seeped under the door. Open up, little sparrow. It's just me. Maya's voice, exactly as I remembered it, warm, tired, loving. The voice that sang me to sleep when thunderstorms rattled our childhood windows. Tears streamed down my face. The knife trembled in my hand. Maya, I whispered. The lock's cold. The voice sighed. My hands are cold. Let me warm them by you. I almost did it. I almost stood up, almost turned the deadbolt. The grief was a physical pull, a hook in my chest, dragging me toward the door. But Mrs. Gable's words echoed, something that wore her voice. I pressed my back against the door, the cold wood biting through my shirt. You're not her, I choked out. Maya wouldn't make this room freeze. Maya wouldn't smell like dirt. Silence. Then the voice changed. The warmth bled away, replaced by a dry, rasping vibration that seemed to come from the floorboards themselves. She is cold. So cold. The dirt is cold. Let me in. I will warm her. I will warm you both. The doorknob rattled violently. The armchair scraped against the floor, dragged backward by an invisible force. Frost spread across the doorframe like black veins. The lavender scent vanished, swallowed by the reek of wet clay and decay. I ran, not to the front door. The lock was old, flimsy. I ran to the fire escape window, fumbling with the latch, my fingers numb with cold. The doorknob shattered. Splinters flew. The door swung inward, revealing only darkness, and the smell of earth, thick, suffocating. Footsteps crossed the threshold, slow, deliberate. Thump, scuffle, thump, scuffle. Stopping inches from where I crouched by the window, I squeezed my eyes shut, the knife raised. "Maya," I sobbed. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry I let you feel alone." The cold lessened, just a fraction. The earthy smell receded, replaced by the faintest hint of lavender, and Maya's voice, clear and strong, filled the space, not from the darkness, but from the deepest part of my own memory. "You were always there, little sparrow. Always." I opened my eyes. The apartment was empty. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting the floor silver. The door hung open on broken hinges. The armchair sat neatly in the corner. The air was warm, still. On the floor, where the footsteps had stopped, lay a single object. Maya's old hairbrush, the one with the chipped turquoise handle she'd carried since college. I'd buried it with her. I picked it up. It was warm. I didn't lock the door that night. I left it open. The footsteps never returned, but sometimes, on the quietest nights, when the grief feels like a stone in my chest, I sit by the window with Maya's brush in my hand. The air grows still. The scent of lavender drifts on a breeze that shouldn't be there, and if I listen very closely, beneath the hum of the city, I hear it. Not footsteps, a soft, contented sigh. The sound of a sister finally at peace, not in the attic, not in the dirt, but right here, in the space between heartbeats, in the warmth I carry. Mrs. Gable replaced the broken door. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a small potted lavender plant one morning. "For the windowsill," she said. "Keeps the bad dreams away." She was wrong. The dreams still come. But now, in the deepest dark, when the loneliness threatens to swallow me whole, I place my palm flat on the warm wood of the floorboards, and I wait, not for footsteps, for the sigh. I'm not alone, and neither is she. The house knows it now. It holds its breath. And in that silence, we remember. Some doors aren't meant to be locked. Some voices aren't meant to be silenced. Some love is too strong for even the deepest dark to keep buried. The footsteps were never hers, but the sigh, that's all her. And it's enough.